Chapter 1072. Damn it! Why are the ruffians in the immortal world so lousy? Still stuck in the ancient times. Yu Qianqiu looked back in the direction of the hallucinatory immortal city, then looked in the direction of the lewd laughter. He couldn't help but pick his nose. Should he go back to do his own things, or fight for justice and eradicate evil? What if he encountered a tough guy, and was beaten up by the ruffians? His nose flapped again as he sniffed the fragrance, faintly evoking memories. He remembered the origin of this fragrance. He clenched his teeth and sighed, but he still dodged. Once he landed on the hill, he immediately saw 3 men surrounding a green-clothed little girl. He didn't guess wrong. It was the little girl called Lu Qing, who followed an old man to sell things in the hallucinatory immortal city. Yu Qianqiu sized up the 3 men, and found that he couldn't see through their cultivation. Their cultivation was clearly higher than his, and their clothes were also somewhat familiar. They seemed to be disciples of some large sect. He couldn't help but frown. As expected, those who dared to do this kind of thing in the open had a background. The moment he landed, the 3 men below also noticed the movement and looked up. When they saw that it was Yu Qianqiu, their expressions changed slightly. How could it be him? A person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. Who didn't know the world commerce's sect master, Yu Qianqiu? Moreover, these 3 people had seen Yu Qianqiu with their own eyes. Although Yu Qianqiu didn't know them, they knew that no matter how strong their background was, this person couldn't be provoked. At least for now, this person was carrying the immortal emperor's decree, and could do whatever he wanted. The green-clothed little girl looked up, and her eyes immediately lit up, as if she had met her savior. She shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, save me." This girl's memory was really good. I forgot what your name was, but you still remembered my name. Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched. He was too embarrassed to ignore it now. He raised his brows and stared at the 3 people below with a sneer. The 3 of you are really in a good mood. This Yu is interested to see what the 3 of you want to do. Continue. This Yu probably won't disturb you. What do you mean I probably won't disturb you? The trio's expressions changed again. One of them politely cupped his hands and said, "So it's sect leader Yu. We greet you." The other 2 hurriedly followed suit and bowed. The man then pointed to the green-clothed girl and said, "We saw her acting suspiciously, and we're just about to question her. Since Sect Master Yu is here, I believe she won't be able to cause any trouble. Let's hand her over to Sect Master Yu to handle." The other 2 nodded in agreement. They knew how to conduct themselves. They had the taste of letting you taste the soup of this little beauty first. Did he really think that all the men in the world were black? Don't you know what it means to be lecherous? Yu Qianqiu's face darkened immediately. He said in a low voice, "Bullsh*t. If you don't scram, I'll chop off your dog heads." The trio smiled flatteringly, and immediately ran away with their tails between their legs. Yu Qianqiu looked at the 3 of them running away. He didn't fly into a rage and chase after them. Let's not talk about whether he could catch up to them or not. The key was that he didn't have the mood to fly into a rage. He reckoned that once he returned, the people from Heartless Palace would ask him why Greycloud Xian died. There was also the matter of the Immortal Palace that he had to deal with. How could he be in the mood to cause more trouble? Hearing movement, he turned around cautiously. The green-clothed girl had already flashed to the hillside. Her 10 fingers were rubbing the edge of her skirt as she looked at him from a distance. Her pure eyes were flickering, and it was as if they could speak. There seemed to be anticipation and fear in her eyes. The fragrance became more and more alluring. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath and shook his head with a smile. "Little girl, go home quickly. Don't run out alone in the future." After saying that, he turned around and was about to leave. He didn't have the good moral character to send the little girl home. He had already tried his best to help her. After all, the world had become so chaotic. There were too many people who needed help. The weak were prey to the strong. He was in a precarious situation, so he had to deal with it carefully. How could he care too much? However, the little girl's crisp voice came from behind him. She said weakly, "My name is Lu." Yu Qianqiu stopped in his tracks and scratched his forehead speechlessly. He turned around and looked at her in confusion, as if asking what she meant. The green-clothed girl immediately said with anticipation, "Yu Qianqiu, We met in the hallucinatory immortal city. My grandfather was there too. You even gave me spirit stones. So what? Yu Qianqiu scratched his head again. He still didn't understand what the little girl was trying to say. Then realization dawned on his face. He took out a big handful of divine-grade spirit stones from his storage pouch and walked in front of her. He pulled out her hands that were rubbing the hem of her skirt, then pried open her slender fingers and placed the big handful of divine-grade spirit stones in her fair palms. The little girl's pretty and slightly immature face revealed a blank expression as she looked at him, then at the spirit stones in her hands. She also didn't understand what he was trying to say. After doing all this, Yu Qianqiu turned into a streak of light and shot into the sky, flying in the direction of the hallucinatory immortal city. However, he immediately felt someone following him. When he turned around, he saw the little girl flying behind him. Why did it feel like she was following him? Could it be that they were going the same way? Yu Qianqiu's brows creased into a frown. His figure flashed and deviated from the direction he was flying in. In the end, the little girl also made a turn in the air and followed him. This time, Yu Qianqiu couldn't take it anymore. His figure stopped, turning around and floating in the air. The little girl blinked her eyes as she stopped in front of him, her hands still holding the pile of spirit stones. Miss Lu, or why are you following me? Yu Qianqiu asked in a low voice. Lu, or had a blank expression on her face, as if she didn't know anything. She raised the spirit stones in her hands and said, Your things are with me. Yu Qianqiu immediately heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed like this little girl was following him, because she wanted to return the spirit stones to him. As expected, she was a naive person who didn't understand the ways of the world. It was all his fault for not making things clear. He smiled bitterly and said, Miss Luer, these spirit stones are for you. There's no need to return them to me. Who knew that Luer's head would shake like a rattle drum, and she said, My grandfather said that people's hearts are sinister. I can't simply take other people's things. Yu Qianqiu was choked by her words. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he said, Since you know that people's hearts are sinister, you still dare to run around with me? I'll give you the spirit stones. Quickly go home, and don't follow me anymore. But you're a good person, Luer said very seriously. However, when she heard that the spirit stones were for her, she kept the things in her hands impolitely. These words were really ironic. Why don't I feel like I'm a good person? Yu Qianqiu scratched his nose in embarrassment and sized up the little girl again. He realized that her cultivation was similar to his and couldn't help but grit his teeth. Such a naive little girl with a low cultivation was like a piece of fatty meat wherever she went. He really didn't feel at ease letting her run around alone. He then asked somewhat gloomily, I say, Luer, where's your house? How can your grandfather feel at ease letting you run around alone? Luer lowered her head slightly and said, I also don't know where my house is. I snuck out alone. My grandfather still doesn't know that I ran out. I can't find my way back. After saying that, she looked at Yu Qianqiu with eyes filled with anticipation, as if she was saying, Take me in. Yu Qianqiu's expression collapsed. How could the World Commerce Association casually take in outsiders? He wanted to immediately harden his heart and leave, but he couldn't win against the other party's clean and clear eyes. After hesitating for a while, he still gave in and asked, Then what if your grandfather wants to find you but can't find you? He won't. Luer shook her head repeatedly and said, If grandfather discovers that I'm not here, as long as I'm still in the immortal realm, he can find me anytime he wants. He can sense where I am. There was such an ability. Wouldn't it have the same effect as his own golden beads? Yu Qianqiu's face was filled with suspicion as he said, Since it's like this, then follow me first. When your grandfather finds you, then you can go home with your grandfather. After saying that, he suddenly had a feeling of abducting a good person. Luer nodded her head repeatedly in response, as if wishing for it to be so. This unlucky girl who cheats people. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes at her and shouted, Follow me. His figure flashed and flew towards the direction of the illusory immortal city. Luer followed with an excited expression. The sea of clouds in front of them was filled with flowing lights of all colors. The two of them also entered the sea of clouds one after the other. Here, Yu Qianqiu deliberately slowed down his flying speed to let others have a chance to see that he had returned. As expected, his return was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples, immediately causing a commotion in the illusory immortal city. On the rooftop of the World Commerce Association, De Mingluan and Wei Chuanxiu were excitedly surrounding Yin Peng and talking about something. When they saw Yu Qianqiu land with a young lady, their expressions froze, and they looked at Lu Er with astonishment. Lu Er moved behind Yu Qianqiu in fear. Yu Qianqiu looked at the three of them in confusion. Before he landed, he clearly saw that the three of them were filled with excitement and didn't know what good thing had happened. The three of them didn't ask about his return. Instead, it was Wei Chuanxiu who lifted her chin towards Lu Er and said with a frown, "Yu Qianqiu, who is this young lady?" De Mingluan's eyes flickered. He faintly felt that he had seen this young lady somewhere before. "She's called Lu Er. I picked her up on the road. Let me make arrangements for her first before coming back to talk." Yu Qianqiu turned around and waved at Lu Er, leading her down quickly. Walking in the corridor, he could faintly hear the sound of mahjong tiles being shuffled. Following the source of the sound to a door, Yu Qianqiu pushed open the door and couldn't help but reveal a bitter smile. The women were all here, for fighting bitterly and one watching. He really didn't know where they got their patience from to never get tired of playing. Actually, he had wronged them. They didn't know that no matter how fun it was, it couldn't withstand playing it day after day. This mahjong tile that didn't have any stakes had long lost its initial passion. The women usually cultivated in their own rooms. Coincidentally, Ziyi pulled them over to play today on a whim, and coincidentally bumped into them when he came back. Hearing the sound of the door opening, the women turned around and were instantly pleasantly surprised. Those who were sitting all stood up. Ziyi even pushed the mahjong tiles away with a crash and exclaimed excitedly, "Big liar! You're back!" Chapter 1073. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's smiling face immediately sunk. He came back happily, but he couldn't seem to be happy when he met this woman. She made a fuss in front of everyone and didn't know what it meant to give others face. Yu Qianqiu gave her a dark look and moved to the side, making way for Lu Er behind him. The little girl looked curiously and timidly at the beautiful sisters in the room. The women looked at each other with complicated expressions. "Wah! I didn't say anything wrong, right?" Ziyi jumped out and turned to face her sisters. She pointed at Yu Qianqiu at the door and shouted, "I said he was going to bring another one back for you." Turning around, she faced Yu Qianqiu with a face full of anger and said, "I didn't think you wouldn't even let off such a young girl. Are you done?" Yu Qianqiu looked at her coldly and snorted, "None of your business. You're shameless." Ziyi scolded with a flushed face. Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered with her and nodded at Yinyu. Yinyu walked over and squeezed out a smile, saying, "You're back." Yu Qianqiu pointed at Lu Er and said, "She's called Lu Er. On the way back, I happened to see her being bullied by a few men, so I saved her. I saw that she didn't know the ways of the world and was afraid that she would encounter some danger, so I brought her back first. When the time comes, her grandfather will come to find her. You look after her first. Don't let her run around the World Commerce Association." Once these words were said, the women immediately understood. So it was like this. It wasn't what everyone thought at all. The furious Ziyi immediately became incomparably embarrassed. Her mouth pouted a few times and she lost her temper. Yu Qianqiu's gaze swept across the few women and coincidentally met with the 100 Charms Beauty's gaze. The 100 Charms Beauty calmly nodded and smiled, while Yu Qianqiu's gaze was somewhat flustered as he avoided it. He waved his hand at the few people and said, "I still have some things to do. You guys help look after her." He pointed at Lu Er and left like he was escaping. Looking at the silhouette disappearing outside the door, the Allure Beauty's expression became slightly desolate. A trace of desolation flashed in her eyes, but she was immediately awakened by Ziyi's cheers. Ziyi was holding the little girl's hand as she clicked her tongue and asked in surprise, "Are you called Lu Er? Liar! Did Yu Qianqiu help you deal with those men who bullied you?" The few women didn't know whether to laugh or cry as they looked at Ziyi. It wouldn't be wrong to say that they were envious of her. They envied her for being heartless. No matter how big the matter was, it was in the past. Next time, she might still go against Yu Qianqiu. Yang Yu had been secretly paying attention to the changes in the Allure Beauty's expression. In order to divert her thoughts, she secretly transmitted a message to her. Ze, this girl. The reason why she went against Yu Qianqiu at every turn was to use this method to attract Yu Qianqiu and make Yu Qianqiu pay more attention to her. However, she didn't know that Yu Qianqiu had always been amenable to coaxing but not coercion. If this continued, it would only make Yu Qianqiu hate her more and more. AI. You must know that although Yu Qianqiu doesn't look like a good person and doesn't do anything good, he has a chivalrous and tender side in his bones. He doesn't like unruly and willful women. Ziyi's actions have produced the opposite effect. It looks like we have to find a chance to give her some advice. The Allure Beauty nodded slightly in agreement. She couldn't help but smile bitterly at Ziyi. Just when Yu Qianqiu returned to the rooftop, he suddenly noticed a stranger on the rooftop. It was an old man with a rigid face. From his blue robe, he could tell that he was from the Heartless Palace. Yu Qianqiu sneered in his heart. What should come has come. Seeing Yu Qianqiu walking over, Wei Chuanqiu and the other two revealed a strange expression. The blue-robed man cupped his hands at him expressionlessly and said, I am Fang Yi, a consecrator of the Heartless Palace. You must be the World Chamber of Commerce's sect master, Yu Qianqiu? So it's Consecrator Fang. I've heard a lot about you. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly returned the greeting with a smile. May I know why Consecrator Fang has come? Sect Master Yu is in charge of a sect and has many busy matters to deal with. I won't beat around the bush and get straight to the point. Fang Yi stared at Yu Qianqiu with a sharp gaze and asked, Sect Master Yu, our sect's great consecrator, Song Yunexan, was ordered to protect you. He has always been by your side. Now that you've returned safely, may I know where Consecrator Tsang is? Yu Qianqiu was stunned and asked with a face full of doubt. Didn't Consecrated Tsang return first? We separated a month ago. Didn't he return to the Heartless Palace? Wei Chuanqiu and the other two exchanged glances. Fang Yi raised his eyebrows and snorted coldly. Sect Master Yu, did you remember wrongly? Consecrated Tsang was ordered to protect your safety. Before receiving the decree of our sect master, he would never separate from you. Sect Master Yu, why don't you think about it carefully? Maybe you can remember where Consecrator Tsang is? It would have been fine if you didn't mention it. I'm angry now that you mention it. Yu Qianqiu glared at him and said, We originally wanted to go to the underworld's boundless horizon to have a look. Who knew that we would find a place called Underworld Spirit Manor in the Underworld River? Consecrated Tsang said that he would go in and explore it and would be back soon. He asked me to hide in a safe place outside and wait for him. In the end, I waited for a few days and didn't see him coming back to find me. I didn't know how long I had to wait for him. Remembering that the wedding of the Celestial Emperor was approaching, I took the Underworld Emperor's token and asked someone to send me back first. From what you said, could it be that he hasn't returned yet? Underworld Spirit Manor. The few of them frowned and muttered. From the looks of confusion on their faces, it seemed that they had never heard of such a place. Yu Qianqiu sneered in his heart. If the Heartless Palace has the guts, go to the Underworld Spirit Manor to investigate. I will wait for the good news. Fang Yi opened his eyes and looked at Yu Qianqiu and said slowly, Not long before Sect Master Yu returned, I received a message from the sect saying that the nameplate belonging to Consecrated Tsang had shattered. In other words, Consecrated Tsang is dead. The other three were not surprised at all. Obviously, they had already heard about this from him. They all stared at Yu Qianqiu without blinking, as if they wanted to see something from his face. In the end, Yu Qianqiu said with a face full of shock, Consecrated Tsang is dead? How is this possible? How many people in the world can block his 3 swords as one sword drawing style? When did this happen? It's easy to dodge a spear in the open, but hard to guard against a stab in the dark. I received news that Consecrated Tsang met with an accident early this morning. Fang Ye's indifferent expression suddenly paused. As he said this, he recalled that the location of Consecrated Tsang's accident was in the underworld. Moreover, Yu Qianqiu had returned on the same day. How many people in the world could rush to the illusionary immortal city from the exit of the underworld in less than a day? After pondering for a while, Fang Yi cupped his fists and said, "Since sect master you doesn't know, I won't disturb you anymore." As he said this, he specially cupped his fists towards Yin Peng. "Congratulations, Mountain Lord Bai Yin, for breaking through to the intermediate stage of Immortal Emperor. Everyone farewell." Then he turned into a flowing light and left. After everyone saw him off, Yu Qianqiu looked at Yin Peng and said in shock, "Senior Yun's cultivation has broken through to the intermediate stage of Immortal Emperor?" Yin Peng revealed a rare smile. "This is all thanks to the Phoenix true blood you gave me. There's no need to be courteous with him. This is what he should do. You helped him guard his home, so it's natural for you to give him something." Wei Chuanxiu waved his hand and looked at Yu Qianqiu with a face full of annoyance. "Back then, I felt that it wasn't right for you to get consecrated Song Yin to protect you. Tell me the truth, is consecrated Song Yun's death really not related to you? You can't wash yourself clean even if you jump into the river Styx, believe it or not," Yu Qianqiu said perfunctorily. "All right, now is not the time to argue about this." De Mingluan raised his hand to stop the two from bickering. He stared at Yu Qianqiu and frowned. "It's good that you're back safely. Do you know that with the Immortal Emperor's wedding approaching, Immortal Empress Ji, who has asked you about your composing progress multiple times? Everyone in the Immortal Palace is very concerned and has sent me multiple messages. As the leader of the Merchant Association, I have personally gone to the World Merchant Association many times for this matter. Since you're back, quickly prepare to go to the Immortal Palace with me." "Damn it! What is this woman Ji Wu trying to do? Is she trying to trick me?" Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart. He was still a little worried that Ji Wu would reveal his background, although he knew that if she wanted to reveal it, she would have done so long ago. Wei Chuanqiu glanced at him and asked De Mingluan worriedly, "Will something happen to him if we really let him go to the Immortal Palace?" Yu Qianqiu nodded in agreement. "Isn't there still a few days? Isn't it too early to go now?" De Mingluan sneered. "What kind of occasion do you think the Immortal Emperor's wedding is? All the sect masters in the immortal world will be there to congratulate him. If you come up with something that can't be shown in public, will they let you perform in public? There's naturally a reason for you to go earlier." As he spoke, he looked at Yin Peng and Wei Chuanqiu's faces and finally at Yu Qianqiu's face. He said slowly, "So you better think carefully. If you really don't have the confidence, you might as well say it now." Wei Chuanqiu's eyebrows twitched as she vaguely sensed something. She asked suspiciously, "What do you mean?" De Mingluan stared at Yu Qianqiu and said in a deep voice, "You said you have the token of the Emperor of the Underworld. Is this true?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the three and thought that there was no need to hide it. He nodded. "It is true. What does this have to do with the token of the Emperor of the Underworld?" De Mingluan's eyes lit up. "Of course it has something to do with it. As far as I know, the token of the Emperor of the Underworld will not easily appear in the hands of unrelated people. It must be given to someone who is deeply trusted by the Emperor of the Underworld. If you really don't have the confidence for this wedding, we still have a chance to save our lives. That is, we will all hide in the underworld while we still have some time. With the protection of the Emperor of the Underworld, Jintai will not be able to do anything to us in the underworld. The Emperor of the Underworld will not let Jintai do anything to us, even if it is for his own sake." "Us?" Yu Qianqiu was surprised. "You also want to escape with us?" "Of course." De Mingluan was angry, pointing and scolding. "What does your song have to do with me? You just have to make one request after another to the Celestial Palace." "Do you think the Celestial Palace is a place where you can bargain? Isn't it because of the two of them that I fought for you? If you run away, Kintai's face will be lost. How can I have a good ending as a guarantor? What else can I do but run away with you? It is my bad luck to know you. I have to live in fear every day." Chapter 1074. Wei Chuanqiu and Yin Peng looked at each other. They had known the big bright wheel for so many years, and it was rare to see him lose his composure like this. It was obvious that he was really unhappy, or that he had no confidence in Yu Qianqiu's trip to the Immortal Palace. The two looked at the culprit at the same time. Yu Qianqiu was also quite embarrassed. The big bright wheel treated him sincerely, and helped him everywhere. If he destroyed the big bright wheel's rice bowl and forced him to flee for his life, it would be really unfair to him. He smiled awkwardly. To tell you the truth, I went to the endless horizon of the underworld this time, and the Emperor of the Underworld happened to be there. The Red Armor Army invited me to meet the Emperor of the Underworld. To be honest, the Emperor of the Underworld is quite friendly to me. The others rolled their eyes when they heard this. He made it sound like he was a big shot. Wei Chuanxiu sneered and lamented. You have to believe it. It is all true. But the key is that the token of the Emperor of the Underworld in my hand was accidentally obtained from someone else, not because I am a trusted person of the Emperor of the Underworld. They looked at each other, and Wei Chuanxiu asked in surprise. In that case, you still dared to take it out to deceive people in Twilight City? Damn it! The army of the Underworld wanted to kill me. I took out the token of the Emperor of the Underworld for the sake of emergency. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. In fact, I didn't know it was the token of the Emperor of the Underworld before I took it out. I only knew that it should be of some help. Nobody would dare to take it out to cause trouble if they knew it was the token of the Emperor of the Underworld. In fact, it was because of this that the Emperor of the Underworld asked the Red Armor Army to interrogate me at the Endless Horizon. They were stunned, not expecting such a thing to happen. That's strange. Where did you get the token of the Emperor of the Underworld? Wei Chuanxiu looked up and down at the intact Yu Qianqiu and said, Since you met the Emperor of the Underworld, did he just let you go? It is because he let me go that I feel strange. Yu Qianqiu shrugged at the great bright wheel and said, There are still many things that I don't understand about this. Do you think I would dare to bring everyone to the Netherworld? What if we fall into a wolf's den right after escaping from the tiger's mouth? Even though he said this to everyone, in reality, he didn't want to easily escape until the last moment. If he didn't run, he would still have a chance if he worked hard. But if he ran, then all his years of hard work in the immortal world would be wasted, and he would have to start from scratch again. The most important thing was that he still had a way out at the critical moment. Even if he wanted to escape, there was no need for him to take the risk of escaping to the Netherworld. Then what do you want to do? De Mingluan asked. Yu Qianqiu looked into the distance and said with determination, Isn't it just going to the Celestial Palace? There was nothing to be afraid of. If it really doesn't work, we can just run together. I've already prepared an escape route for everyone. No one can do anything to us. After his experience in the All Heavens boundary, in terms of mentality, the Celestial Palace could no longer give him too much pressure. When they heard this, they looked at each other. They didn't know whether it was true or not. De Mingluan narrowed his eyes and looked at him for a while, then said in a deep voice, In that case, I have nothing to say. I'll go back and give some instructions. I'll look for you later. With that he flew away. De Mingluan went to make preparations. Yu Qianqiu, who had just returned and had to rush to the Celestial Palace, naturally had to make some preparations. After having a secret discussion with Wei Chuanxiu and Yin Peng on the rooftop, he quickly went downstairs and hid in a room. He took out the token of authority of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance and the token of passage to the underworld that the great Ming Luan had given him. He held one in each hand and waited for a while. Because the token of authority of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance was too obvious, he put it away. As for the Netherworld Passage token, he didn't stand on ceremony. It might be difficult for others to imitate, but it wasn't difficult for him at all. He used Jinju to make dozens of tokens in one go as templates, so that he could imitate it when needed. After doing this, he quickly gathered the lords of the various countries to meet in the conference room on the 21st floor. In the end, he found that everyone couldn't resist the temptation in the end. They used elixirs and the immortal Ascension passage to forcibly raise their cultivation to the early stage of small immortal. In this regard, Yu Qianqiu expressed his understanding, because a small number of them had already reached the end of their lifespans. Since they couldn't be sure that they would succeed naturally, they could only take a shortcut. When the others saw the cultivation of the people around them skyrocketing, they couldn't remain indifferent. They gritted their teeth and followed suit. After everyone communicated, Yu Qianqiu carefully observed everyone's mental state. He was afraid that everyone would lose control of their emotions if they were cooped up here for too long. Some people would want to leave or go back. However, he didn't find anything out of the ordinary. After thinking about it carefully, he felt relieved. Think about it. A mere few years was really nothing to cultivators. Moreover, the illusory immortal city had cultivation resources that everyone couldn't compare to in the mortal world. As long as it was something that everyone needed for cultivation, the World Chamber of Commerce had never been stingy with everyone. What Yu Qianqiu didn't know, and most importantly, was that the longer everyone stayed in the illusory immortal city, the more they understood how dangerous the outside world was, and the more they understood how tiny they were. Even though they were overlords of an area in the mortal world, in the immortal dimension that was filled with sects like trees in a forest, any ordinary expert from any sect would be able to easily deal with them. With their cultivations, it was impossible for them to stand out in the immortal dimension. Therefore, whether it was in terms of cultivation resources or safety, having the World Chamber of Commerce protect them in the illusory immortal city was really the best. Whether it was the barrenness of the mortal world or the dangers of the outside world, they temporarily didn't consider it. Currently, they had Yu Qianqiu who could provide them with resources. If they didn't make good use of it, they wouldn't be the rulers of the various countries they used to be. When he returned to the rooftop, the great bright wheel was already waiting for him. Yu Qianqiu smiled as he took out the token of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance and the token of passage to the underworld. When the great bright wheel received it, it was silent for a moment before it said, "It seems that these things didn't help you much in the underworld, because the token of the underworld emperor is more useful than them." Yu Qianqiu smiled. Yun Peng and Wei Chuanxiu, who were at the side, seemed to be sending him off. Wei Chuanxiu looked around and didn't see any movement from the women. She asked thoughtfully, "You're not sure if you'll be lucky or not. Aren't you going to say goodbye to them before you leave?" "I've been wandering outside all year round and haven't had time to accompany them. I've already let them down. I'd rather have them complain about me and think that I'm a womanizer than have them worry about me. I can only hope that I can create a future for them with no regrets." Yu Qianqiu shook his head with a wry smile before summoning a flying shuttle and taking the lead to fly into it. The great bright wheel followed closely behind. A stream of light flew far away from the rooftop of the World Chamber of Commerce. It blended into the streams of light that rose and fell in the illusory immortal city and disappeared. The disciples of the various sects who had been secretly watching the World Chamber of Commerce also quietly disappeared. On a day when the sky was filled with rosy clouds, Yu Qianqiu flew towards the main peak of the blissful immortal realm for the first time. There was a majestic palace shining brightly amidst the misty clouds. The two landed in a world made of gold. Relying on a token that shone with golden light, the great bright wheel brought him into the righteous heaven gate, which was guarded by two golden-robed guards. Yu Qianqiu followed behind the great bright wheel and stared dumbfoundedly at the incomparably wide and majestic golden plaza in front of him. The ground was paved with large golden tiles. There were golden pillars, golden towers, golden arched bridges, golden railings, and other things at regular intervals. In addition to the majestic palace that shone with golden light in the distance, this was clearly a golden kingdom, a golden world. Walking in this golden world, the ground was like a glossy yellow mirror that could clearly reflect the people walking on it. Each golden pillar that brushed past was several times thicker than a person, and each golden tile on the ground was several times wider than a bed. Looking around in such a grand atmosphere, it made one feel so insignificant, like an ant climbing on a mountain of gold. This was Jin Tai's immortal palace. Yu Qianqiu was inwardly speechless. If he didn't know that Jin Tai was a gold spirit, just the aura of the immortal palace in front of him would have frightened him. The two walked for more than an hour before arriving at the bottom of a golden flight of steps that increased in height by 100 meters. At the top of the flight of steps was the huge immortal palace that shone with golden light. It made one look up at the mountain and added a sense of oppression. On both sides of the flight of steps, there were halberd-wielding guards at regular intervals. The strict atmosphere was used to guide people, The great bright wheel suddenly raised its hand, and the two stopped at the bottom of the flight of steps. On the way here, the great bright wheel had told Yu Qianqiu that normal people were not allowed to use spells to fly within the immortal palace. They could only walk. Yu Qianqiu looked at the flight of steps and was speechless. What kind of rule was this? They had already walked for more than half an hour. Adding on the flight of steps that were hundreds of meters high, wouldn't it be a waste of other people's time? Just as he was thinking, he saw a person who violated the rules. Instead of walking, she directly flashed down from the flight of steps and landed on the lowest step in front of the two of them. The person who came was wearing a golden robe. Not only did she look old, she was actually an old lady with wrinkled skin and white hair. Her eyes were as sharp as an eagle's as she looked at Yu Qianqiu, causing Yu Qianqiu's heart to jump. Someone who could brazenly violate the rules of the immortal palace was naturally not an ordinary person. Yu Qianqiu was muttering the identity of the person who came. The great bright wheel had already secretly warned him. This person is the chief steward of the immortal palace. Her name is Nie Xiaoqian. Her son is the commander of internal affairs, He Lai, who controls the immortal palace guards. Both mother and son have high cultivation, and can be said to be the two people the immortal emperor trusts the most. After saying this secretly, the great bright wheel quickly cupped his hands and bowed to the person who came. Greetings, Chief Steward Nie. Nie Xiaoqian? Her name is Nie Xiaoqian? Why isn't her son surnamed Ning? The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth couldn't help but twitch. He was quite shocked. This chief steward Nie ignored the great bright wheel and stared at Yu Qianqiu. She asked indifferently, "You are Yu Qianqiu?" Yu Qianqiu hurriedly bowed and said, "Yu Qianqiu greets Chief Steward Nie." Chapter 1075. Nie Xiaoqian looked at him for a while and asked, "Are you ready?" This baffling question made Yu Qianqiu stare blankly. After being secretly pointed out by the great bright wheel, he finally understood that Yi Zichen was asking if he had prepared the song for his gift. Immediately he modestly replied, "I have prepared it, but I am afraid that I cannot present it." Nie Xiaoqian didn't ask any more questions. She crushed a jade talisman, and after a while, a beam of light flew over from afar. A middle-aged woman wearing a green veil landed on the ground and walked up to the two. She cupped her hands and said, "Greetings, manager." Yu Qianqiu glanced at her and couldn't help but be curious. After entering the paradise of bliss, everyone he saw was wearing a golden robe. He didn't expect to see a woman dressed in a different style in the immortal palace. He secretly transmitted his voice to the great bright wheel. "Who is this woman?" The great bright wheel, who was standing to the side, replied, "Her name is Qingyang. She is the one who choreographed the dance for the immortal emperor. Because she often dances, she is probably the only person in the immortal palace who doesn't need to wear a golden robe like us." "Qingyang, this person is Yu Qianqiu. This is related to the immortal emperor's wedding, so you better help him. Otherwise, he will become the laughing stock of the world." General Manager Nie Xiaoqian pouted at Yu Qianqiu. "Right here?" Qingyang coldly looked around. Her words and actions were not as respectful as the great bright wheel to Nie Xiaoqian. Nie Xiaoqian frowned and said, "The song for the immortal emperor's wedding can only be released to the public on the day of the wedding. Not to mention, his unorthodox song still needs your arrangement. Let's go to your Green Pear Palace to have a look. If he really can't be shown in public, I'll explain to Immortal Empress Wu Ji." Qingyang didn't say anything. She turned around and flew away like a streak of light. Chief Steward Nie swept a glance at the remaining two and said, "Let's go to Green Pear Palace together." She also transformed into a stream of light and flashed away. The great bright wheel immediately flew after her. At the bottom of the stairs, Yu Qianqiu was at a loss. He then jogged in the direction that they flew in. After running for a short distance, a ray of light shot back. Deming had returned and was floating in the air. He stared down at the ground and asked angrily, "Yu Qianqiu, why are you running here? Damn it! Didn't you say that ordinary people aren't allowed to fly here?" The expression on Yu Qianqiu's face was even more furious than his. Seeing that others could fly while he could only run, it would be strange if he could be happy. Demingluan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If the head chief says it's okay, then it's okay. What did she say that it was okay? If you don't make things clear, would I dare to take the risk? Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth. He was too lazy to argue with Deming Luan. He waved his hand and interrupted. Stop talking nonsense. This isn't a place for you to behave atrociously. Quickly follow me. Don't let the head chief wait for too long. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu relaxed. Thus, the two of them quickly flew away from this place. After flying out of the Golden World, the two of them headed straight for a mountain peak not far away. On the peak of the mountain, there was a huge ancient palace made of pure wood. On the small square outside the palace, Qing Yang, who looked indistinct and serious, glanced at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Come with me." Yu Qianqiu cautiously glanced at the great bright wheel. When he saw the great bright wheel nod, he quickly followed behind Qing Yang. Deming Luan followed behind head chief steward Nia, who knew that Qing Yang, who was at the front, would suddenly turn around and say, "The two of you don't follow us. Especially you, head chief steward. The atmosphere of my Green Pear Palace doesn't match your arrogant manner." After she finished speaking, she turned around and continued to walk into the palace. Following behind her, Yu Qianqiu secretly clicked his tongue. He didn't know what kind of background this woman had. She actually dared to speak to the Golden Emperor's trusted aide, the head chief steward Nia, in such a tone. Stopping, head chief steward Nia had a helpless expression. He turned around to look at Deming Luan and smiled wryly. "My daughter really doesn't give me any face." Yu Qianqiu, who had just stepped into the palace, pricked up his ears. Deming Luan watched as Yu Qianqiu disappeared into the palace. After a moment of silence, she bluntly said, "Head chief steward, forgive me for speaking bluntly. Our loyalty to the immortal emperor cannot be forced onto the next generation." Once these treasonous words came out, head chief steward Nia's body shook. Her sharp gaze pierced straight into Deming Luan's calm eyes. A murderous aura lingered around her body. After a long time, she slowly retracted it back into her body. She slightly sighed and said, "Perhaps what you said is right. However, this is the only time. I don't want to hear you say such words in my ears again." Then, her tone changed and she coldly said, "I can see that you are very considerate of this Yu Qianqiu. Head chief steward is wise. I have always been loyal to the immortal emperor. The sun and moon can bear witness." Deming Luan slightly bowed towards her. Then she helplessly said, "I won't hide it from head chief steward. I actually don't have much of a relationship with this Yu Qianqiu. The reason why I take care of him is because we were friends in the past. As long as it doesn't harm the immortal palace's interests, please help me a little." Head chief steward Nia's gaze that was full of deep meaning moved away from him. She didn't pursue the matter any further. Instead, she looked at the palace gate of the Green Pear Palace with a sense of loss. Everyone had their own story. Even though she was a high-ranking official, she was no exception. The people outside could not hear any sound from inside the Green Pear Palace. It was clear that there was a soundproof formation inside. About an hour later, Qing Yang's figure flashed out from the palace gate. Deming Luan didn't see Yu Qianqiu. Her eyes couldn't help but slightly narrow as she stared at Qing Yang. "How is it? Is this Yu Qianqiu's item presentable?" Head chief steward Nia helplessly asked. Qing Yang's expression was cold. She didn't directly comment on whether Yu Qianqiu's item was good or bad. She only replied without a smile, "Help him make some arrangements. When the time comes, it should be able to satisfy the immortal emperor and immortal empress." Hearing these words, Deming Luan's anxious heart finally relaxed. He knew that since this woman said these words, Yu Qianqiu should be able to pass this hurdle. Head chief steward Nia also slightly nodded his head. "Then I'll leave this Yu Qianqiu to you. You must bring out something satisfactory on the day of the wedding." "I have a request," Qing Yang coldly said. "I need enough people to accompany the dancers. I also need to create enough instrumental music." The wrinkled chief steward Nia didn't hesitate to say, "This is not a problem. I will contact the people in charge of manpower and skilled craftsmen. They will do their best to cooperate with you." After receiving the reply, Qing Yang didn't say any polite words of thanks. Instead, she turned around with a cold expression and was about to leave. At this time, a golden-robed guard quickly rushed over and bowed to Chief Steward Nia. reporting to Chief Steward. The Immortal Empress heard that Yu Qianqiu is here and wants to see Yu Qianqiu. Everyone present was startled when they heard this, especially Qingyang. She stopped in her tracks and turned back around, frowning as she looked at Chief Steward Nia. The latter seemed to know that she didn't like people to disturb her work. However, no matter what, Jiwu was now carrying the title of the Immortal Empress. As long as it wasn't an unreasonable request, it wouldn't be easy to refuse. With a straight face he said, "Since the Immortal Empress wants to see him, Qingyang, quickly tell Yu Qianqiu to come out and see the Immortal Empress at the Crystal Palace." Qingyang coldly replied, "Yes." Her figure flickered as she returned to the palace. Not long after, Yu Qianqiu ran out with a puzzled look on his face. He looked at the great bright wheel with a questioning gaze. It seemed that Qingyang hadn't told him anything. Seeing the confusion on his face, Chief Steward Nia pointed at the guard who came to report and said indifferently, "Yu Qianqiu, Immortal Empress Ji Wu wants to see you. Go with her to see her." After that, quickly return to the Green Pear Palace and continue to listen to her orders. "Do you understand?" Yu Qianqiu was startled. Why did that woman Ji Wu want to see him now? Confused, he cupped his fists and replied yes. Then he flew away with the guard. The great bright wheel's eyes also flickered. He didn't know whether it was a good or bad thing for Ji Wu to summon Yu Qianqiu. He frowned and cupped his fists. "Chief Steward, if there is nothing else, I will return to the Chamber of Commerce Alliance." Chief Steward Nia nodded and left first. The great bright wheel looked in the direction of the Crystal Palace in the distance, then frowned and turned into a stream of light and flew away. Outside a gate with a tall jade wall, Yu Qianqiu immediately saw the colorful jade palace inside. The guard stopped outside the gate and stretched his hand inside. "Don't let the Immortal Empress wait for too long. Quickly go and see her." "Thank you." Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists and walked in without any clues on his face. In fact, his mind was spinning quickly. He didn't know if Lu Yanqing and Immortal Crocodile Monarch were here. As soon as he stepped into the palace, he was immediately attracted by a thatched hut not far away. He didn't understand why there was such a strange thatched hut in this place that looked like a crystal palace. The courtyard was empty and desolate, and not a single person could be seen. Just as Yu Qianqiu was wondering why the dignified Immortal Queen's residence did not have a servant, he saw a familiar person walking out of the palace door in front of him. It was none other than Lu Yanqing. Lu Yanqing looked at him with a complicated expression and was stunned for a moment. Then she bowed and led the way into the hall. "The Immortal Empress is waiting for you inside." Although there was a smile on Yu Qianqiu's face, there was an unconcealable coldness in his eyes. It was hard for him to have a good impression of this woman, who made decisions on her own, and made him uncomfortable. When he walked along the jade steps to the door of the hall, he smiled with a slightly sarcastic smile and cupped his fists. "Thank you." When Lu Yanqing saw the unforgettable coldness in his eyes, her face couldn't help but turn pale. Her delicate body swayed for a moment, and she turned back and stepped into the hall with her head slightly lowered. After Yu Qianqiu followed her in, he found that the hall was empty. He didn't understand what it meant. He saw Lu Yanqing, who was leading the way, turn into the back hall. He paused for a moment, but finally followed her. Who knew that as soon as he stepped into the rear hall, a large hand would grab the collar behind his neck like a sneak attack. Yu Qianqiu was shocked and quickly dodged while turning his head to look, only to see a black-clothed silver-haired big man laughing loudly at him. "Stinking brat! We finally meet again. Old monster." Yu Qianqiu was pleasantly surprised. Who else could this person be but the Immortal Crocodile Monarch that he had been talking about? Before he landed, he flashed back into the air. The two fellows who had not seen each other for a long time couldn't help but hug each other. Chapter 1076. After pushing each other away, the two of them threw punches at each other, or patted each other's backs. They couldn't help but sigh when they reunited after such a long time. During this time, Yu Qianqiu faintly noticed that the strength of the other party's hands seemed to be a little weaker than before. He remembered that when the other party casually patted him twice, he had to grit his teeth in pain. Now it was just like that. He didn't think too much about it. It was probably because his cultivation had improved. He smiled and looked up and down. Old monster, how have you been these years? Immortal Crocodile's expression stiffened slightly. He pushed him and waved his hand to change the topic. Let's not just talk about ourselves. You and Sister Ji, who can be considered old acquaintances. Hurry up and say hello. Yu Qianqiu looked over and saw Lu Yanqing accompanying a woman with a noble temperament that was even more beautiful than Yu Qianqiu. Her long white dress slid down the jade stairs behind her like flowing water. Her black eyebrows, eyes, nose, and red lips were all shockingly beautiful. This was not the first time he had met this person. If it wasn't immortal monarch Ji Wu, who else could it be? Beautiful. No wonder Jin Dun wanted to marry her. In order to show respect or politeness, Yu Qianqiu stopped his eyes from sliding to the other party's full chest. He smiled bitterly and bowed. Yu Qianqiu greets the immortal empress. Ji Wu's beautiful eyes carefully looked at Yu Qianqiu. Although it wasn't the first time she had met Yu Qianqiu had a head full of braids, and his skin was bronze. He was dressed like a barbarian. It was the first time she had seen Yu Qianqiu's original appearance. In the end, she found that it didn't match the elegant and handsome scholar in her mind. She was somewhat disappointed. After a pause, she said faintly, Yu Qianqiu, we meet again. Yu Qianqiu is honored to be able to see you again. Yu Qianqiu's words and actions remained respectful and courteous, but he was actually cursing in his heart. If it wasn't for this woman calling him out, he wouldn't have been tossed here to do such a disgusting thing. Ji Wu didn't seem to like the title Immortal Empress. She frowned a few times. Immortal Crocodile was also a little unhappy. He frowned and waved his hand. All right. Stop pretending to be refined. I know better than anyone what kind of person you are. Little sister Ji Wu spent a lot of effort to bring you here, not to listen to your flattery. Do you know why she brought you here? In any case, it was definitely not something good. Yu Qianqiu's expression did not change. I don't know. Immortal Crocodile chuckled coldly and circled around him until Yu Qianqiu's hair stood on end. He clicked his tongue and said, Kid, you're not simple at all. You actually found a way to come to the immortal realm from the human world and set up a sect in the immortal realm. Are you trying to bully others because they don't know your background? Thank you, Immortal Empress and Brother Crocodile, for keeping my secret, Yu Qianqiu said politely, but in his heart, he was wondering what this guy was trying to do by beating around the bush. It's good that you know. Immortal Crocodile placed his big hands on Yu Qianqiu's shoulders and said sincerely, Then shouldn't you express something? Express something? Yu Qianqiu broke away from his hands and asked warily, Express what? Immortal Crocodile glanced at Ji Wu, then turned back and said firmly, I won't hide it from you. Little sister Ji Wu didn't want to agree to this wedding at all. It was Lady Jean who threatened her with my life that forced little sister Ji Wu to agree. The two of us have always wanted to escape, but there are many experts in the Paradise Immortal realm. With our strength, we can't escape at all. When we were in the human world, I saw the magic of your teleportation formation. Yu Qianqiu, please help us this once. Use the teleportation formation to send us back to the human world. How about that? This, Yu Qianqiu secretly glanced at Lu Yanqing and asked secretly, Did you tell them the secret of going back and forth to the human world? No, I didn't say a word about this, Lu Yanqing replied quietly. Yu Qianqiu was relieved when he heard this. He smiled bitterly at Immortal Crocodile and said, If you knew this would happen, you wouldn't have come back from the human world. I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you now. There's nothing I can do about this. It wasn't that he didn't want to help, but he didn't dare to. He and Ji Wu didn't have any friendship at all. It was not worthwhile to take risks for her. Although he had some friendship with Immortal Crocodile in the human world, it was built on the basis of mutual benefit. Their relationship had not reached the point where they could reveal any secret. Besides, when he came here, Immortal Crocodile's wife disappeared. If he didn't suspect him, who else could he suspect? If his wife was stolen, no man would agree to it. He was afraid that Jean Tai would dig 3 feet into the ground to find him. Even if he hid in the human world, he might not be safe. In short, saving these two people wouldn't do him any good. Instead, it would cause a lot of trouble. He couldn't waste so many years of effort to save them. It was not worth it. Anyway, Jiwoo wasn't his woman. Whoever she married had nothing to do with him, so he could only refuse. The back hall instantly became frighteningly quiet. Immortal Crocodile's face gradually turned sinister. He sneered and said, "I knew you were ruthless and didn't want to cause trouble for the two of us. Since you didn't save us first, don't blame me for being rude. You came from the human world during the war, have the divine sword of the demon lord of 10,000 swords, and are also cultivating the Samadhi true fire. There's no need for me to help you keep it a secret." Jiwoo and Lu Yanqing were shocked. They didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to have the divine sword of the demon lord of 10,000 swords, and he was also cultivating the Samadhi true fire. "Are you threatening me?" Yu Qianqiu's expression turned cold. Being threatened in such an undisguised manner, the thing that had settled in his bones after many years of tempering inadvertently came out again. At this time, he ignored the people standing here and just narrowed his eyes and sneered. "Old monster! Be a man with a conscience. If I hadn't saved you too, you would still be trapped in the heaven and earth universe formation. So, I don't owe you anything. If I remember correctly, the two of you promised not to reveal my secret. I didn't expect you to go back on your word." For him, there was no point in pretending now. Whether he saved them or they revealed his secret, the Immortal Palace would not let him go. In that case, why should he be threatened by them and save them? Either way, his hard work would be ruined. If he went back and started from scratch, he might as well leave the two of them to be tortured by Jin Tai. No one would have an easy time. Immortal Crocodile glared at him and was about to flare up, but Jiwoo reached out and stopped him. Jiwoo looked at Yu Qianqiu with surprise. She could see that he wasn't afraid of her at all. She frowned slightly and said, "Yu Qianqiu, if you have a way to help us escape, why don't you help us? We will definitely repay you in the future." "Repay you in the future?" Yu Qianqiu sneered. "I think it's better not to. Today, I have seen what it means to go back on your word. How can I expect you to repay me in the future?" Lu Yanqing, who was at the side, was secretly shocked. She didn't expect that Yu Qianqiu wasn't even afraid of an intermediate stage immortal emperor expert. She understood that it wasn't luck that he was able to get to where he was today. Just this courage and spirit alone wasn't something an ordinary person could compare with. "You, Immortal Crocodile," who was about to flare up again, was stopped by Jiwoo's brother Crocodile. Jiwoo stared at Yu Qianqiu, who was standing expressionlessly. After hesitating for a while, she bit her lip and said slowly, "Yu Qianqiu, as long as you save us, I am willing to be your woman." Although her face was still cold, there was already a faint redness under her pink skin. It took a lot of courage to say such words. As soon as she said this, everyone thought they heard wrong. However, she said it word by word, so it was difficult to mishear. In an instant, the entire palace was so quiet that even ants could be heard. Yu Qianqiu, who was acting like a dog that didn't eat shit, choked. His mouth opened so wide that a fist could fit in it. His domineering and arrogant aura had all gone to hell. His current image was no different from that of a fool. Immortal Crocodile reacted and immediately said anxiously, "This kid and Jin Tai are not good people. Being his woman is the same as falling out of the tiger's den into the wolf's den. At most, we will just die. Sister, why do you have to humiliate yourself like this?" Jiwoo ignored him at this time. She was going all out, but Yu Qianqiu did not answer. As a top beauty who had always been high and mighty, it hurt her self-esteem a little. She immediately said with a frosty face, "Yu Qianqiu, do you think this is not good enough? Or do you think my cultivation and looks are not good enough for you?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned by her roar. He didn't understand what she was doing. He smiled bitterly and said, "I am good enough, I am good enough. I am not good enough for you. Yu Qianqiu, I'm not even good enough to carry your shoes. Cut the crap." Jiwoo waved her hand and interrupted him. She was embarrassed and angry. She said sternly, "So you agree? Kid, how dare you?" Immortal Crocodile pointed at Yu Qianqiu and shouted angrily, "If you dare to take advantage of me, I will fight you to the death. I say, the two of you, please spare me." Yu Qianqiu gave in and bowed to the two of them. It's not that I don't want to help the two of you, but I really can't do anything. The treasures I set up the teleportation array are used up. The two of you must have heard about my master challenging the Emperor of the Underworld, and about me going to the Underworld. In fact, I wanted to go to the Underworld to find my master and ask for more treasures. Unfortunately, I didn't find my master. Otherwise, how could I not save him? It wasn't that he didn't like beauties, especially a great beauty like Ji Woo, but he was not the kind of person who would lose his mind at the sight of a beautiful woman. No matter how beautiful Ji Woo was to him, she was still an outsider who he didn't know. He would not trade the future of a group of women in his family. Lu Yanqing looked at him in surprise. Ji Woo's beauty made her heart beat faster. She didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to be so indifferent. Chapter 1077. The treasure used to set up the teleportation formation? Immortal Lord Crocodile was startled. He calmed down and asked, "Are you talking about the silver balls I saw before?" Yu Qianqiu immediately showed a grateful expression and cupped his hands at him. "Old monster, it's good that you remember. You finally cleared my name. You've seen how to use those things. The more you use, the less you'll get." He turned to Ji Woo and said, "Immortal Empress, please understand. I really can't do anything for the time being. I'm warning you, don't call me Immortal Empress." Ji Woo said through gritted teeth. She had said those embarrassing words without knowing the truth. Now, she could only use anger to cover up her embarrassment. Yu Qianqiu had a fawning expression on his face as he repeatedly agreed. As long as this matter could be resolved peacefully, he did not mind suffering a bit of grievance. To him, the true deciding factor was who would have the last laugh, and it was definitely not a momentary face. This was because he had never thought of himself as a gentleman, and he did not mind admitting that he was a vile character. As a result, Ji Woo felt nauseous. The reason why she had said those words before was because she had thought that Yu Qianqiu was a talented scholar from the songs she had heard. It should be known that the more beautiful a woman was, the more they would yearn for a scholar. Subconsciously, she had some admiration, which was why she had said those words without thinking. But now, it almost made her vomit. She hated herself for being blind, and almost giving herself to a sycophant. Thus, her pretty face turned pale from anger, and she wished she could slap herself twice. She even wanted to skin Yu Qianqiu alive. Immortal Crocodile exclaimed in surprise. "I checked those small silver balls back then, and I didn't seem to notice anything unusual. Can't I refine more? It would be easy if it were as easy as you say." Yu Qianqiu complained bitterly. "I didn't have to risk my life to run to the netherworld, and I almost got killed. Don't think that those silver balls are simple. Only my master knows how to make them. Only my master can make them. Did you find your master in the netherworld?" Immortal Lord Crocodile asked. Yu Qianqiu shook his head dejectedly. "No." Immortal Lord Crocodile was not surprised by this answer. Based on his understanding, Bai Changchun had been forced into the mysterious Forbidden Land by the Emperor of the Netherworld. Immortal Lord Crocodile continued to ask questions about some suspicious points, including why Yu Qianqiu had the Emperor of the Netherworld's token. However, this was Yu Qianqiu's forte. He easily dealt with it. In the end, Immortal Lord Crocodile was no longer angry. To be honest, Lu Yanqing, who was at the side, was also a woman and a great beauty. In fact, she was very sympathetic towards Ji Woo's experience. She did not understand why Yu Qianqiu was unwilling to help them, when he could easily travel back and forth between the human world, and there were peerless beauties throwing themselves into his arms. Then she remembered that she was also a beautiful woman, and had thrown herself at him. But he had not accepted her either. She could not help but feel bitter. After experiencing so many things, she could reflect on some things. Maybe Yu Qianqiu had his reasons for doing this. It had been proven that Yu Qianqiu's decisions were often unreasonable at first, but they were often right in the end, unlike her, who always brought trouble to others. "Get him out." Ji Woo, whose face was as cold as ice, suddenly said. Although she didn't mention any names, everyone knew that she was asking someone to get out of here. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Yu Qianqiu and sighed. "We had high hopes for you, but, if we had known, we would not have dragged you into this." Go. Where should I go? Yu Qianqiu spread his hands in an aggrieved manner and said, If you leak my secret, the immortal palace will definitely not let me off. Since I'm going to die either way, I won't bother running around. I'll just leave it to fate. How could he leave so casually in fear? His words were a roundabout way of sounding out what was going on. Immortal Lord Crocodile glared at him. We are not as bad as you think. Go. We will not drag you down with us. This time, Yu Qianqiu was relieved. He immediately patted his chest and promised, Old monster, don't worry. As long as I am alive, I will find a way to save you and the immortal empress. Just you wait. Immortal Lord Crocodile's teeth hurt. She had already become the immortal empress. What was done was done. Why would she need you to save her? You were just looking for excitement. He stole a glance at his sister Jiwu. Sure enough, Jiwu gritted her teeth, pointed her finger at Yu Qianqiu and yelled, Get out of here. Yu Qianqiu did not mind her bossy attitude at all. He nodded and bowed as he walked out. Then I will not disturb you anymore. If you need anything, you can send someone to Green Pear Palace to find me at any time. Jiwu was so angry that she turned her head to the side. She regretted what she had said before. She would rather not see this despicable person. Even if she was beaten to death, she would never let him see her ugly face again. Lu Yanqing, who was at the side, secretly sighed. Combined with the fact that Yu Qianqiu was not afraid of Jiwu's words and actions, and then seeing Yu Qianqiu's fawning look, and the back view of him being scolded to leave, she actually felt a burst of sadness for no reason, and almost shed tears. In an instant, it was as if she had taken a miraculous elixir. She vaguely understood some things. In fact, with this man's ability to come and go freely, there was no need for him to humiliate himself like this. At worst, he could just leave. However, as the supreme being of the human world, while enjoying the glory, he also worked hard to fulfill his duty. In order to stop the killing in the human world, he brought everyone to the immortal world to work hard. He shouldered the future and hope of too many people in the human world. Everyone only saw the glorious side of him in front of them, but they did not know the heartache of him being humiliated behind his back. Perhaps what she was thinking was exactly what Yu Qianqiu was subconsciously forcing himself to do. However, Yu Qianqiu was black-hearted and thick-skinned. He had long been invulnerable to such things. As long as he could take advantage of it, everything else was a piece of cake. You humiliate yourself, I'll do my own. Let's see who has the last laugh. After exiting the Crystal Palace, Yu Qianqiu was brought back to the Green Pear Palace. He walked alone to the entrance of the main hall. Just as he stretched his foot over the threshold, he quickly retracted it. He was afraid that someone would be angry at his impoliteness. Fortunately, Qingyang's voice came from inside, "Come in." Only then did he tidy his clothes and walk in. However, once he stepped in, time passed day by day, but he never came out again. No one knew what he was doing inside. It was another morning filled with rosy clouds. On the peak of the Passion Mound, the highest peak of the Passionless Palace, there was another rainbow. Wang Qing, who was the closest to the rainbow, sat cross-legged on the edge of the cliff. He received the rosy clouds in the morning and bathed in the starlight at night. He sat there motionlessly for a few days and nights. As the morning sun rose, coinciding with the angle of light refraction, a rare and magnificent tear stain appeared on the silver mask that covered his face. It gave off a sorrowful feeling, as if the flower had splashed its tears and the bird had left its heart. In the eye sockets of the mask, the eyes that had not been opened for a few days and nights slowly opened. Looking around, one suddenly found that today's rosy clouds were unprecedentedly magnificent and majestic. Is this to send me off? Wang Qing let out a sigh and slowly stood up. He turned around smoothly and walked towards the giant sword that was inserted in the middle of the mountain peak. He stopped when he was about 10 feet away from it. The snow-blue giant sword gradually emitted a magnificent snow-blue light that flowed endlessly on the sword. It seemed to have felt something and let out a soft, inging sound, which was hoarse and heart-stirring, lasting for a long time. A gust of wind blew, the blue robe fluttered, and the long black hair behind the mask intertwined and danced. The giant sword suddenly burst out a breathtaking snow-blue brilliance, like a bright pearl between heaven and earth. It complemented Wang Qing, who was standing 10 feet away. The momentum faintly showed the tendency of man and sword becoming one. You and I are connected. I know that you want to show your brilliance. But do you know why I have not pulled you out? Because you and I want to accumulate the strongest sword intent. Once we use it, we must be invincible. The giant sword seemed to understand Wang Qing's words. The huge sword body trembled faintly, and the soft sound also became high-pitched. The wide blue robe on Wang Qing's body suddenly rolled against the wind. A sharp aura burst out from the edge of the robe and drew an arc on the ground of the mountain peak. The soil and stones on the ground were blown away by the wind. With the giant sword as the center, a circular deep mark with a radius of 10 feet appeared around it. Wang Qing touched the snow-blue ring on his left index finger, and then his left hand formed a claw on the giant sword. The top of the mountain trembled, and a cylindrical rock with a diameter of 6 meters and a depth of more than 10 meters slowly pulled out the 6-dragon snow-blue sword. After the whole mountain rock was completely pulled out of the top of the mountain with the giant sword, the snow-blue ring on Wang Qing's index finger, that was condensed into a claw, shot out a blue light. It directly swallowed the whole mountain rock together with the giant sword and disappeared. Wang Qing brazenly put the large rock and the giant sword into the storage ring. His intention was very obvious. He still did not want to pull out the sword until that moment. He wanted to brew the strongest sword intent when he pulled out the sword. The round pit that had just appeared on the top of the mountain was under his feet. He was not in the mood to look at it. He just wanted to see what could attract his attention at this moment. He slowly turned around and turned around. The wide blue robe wrapped around his tall and thin body was deformed and tossed in the wind. His long hair sometimes blew straight back, and sometimes it was blown messily by the wind on his shoulders. The pair of eyes under the silver mask showed a rare tenderness. She looked around at the sea of clouds, the rising sun, and the rainbow that traversed the peak of the mountain. It was as if she wanted to take in all of these and keep them in her memory forever. However, in the sea of clouds in front of him, a sweet-tempered woman from his memories surged out and smiled at him. Suddenly, an innocent child came out of the sea of clouds and ran around the woman. In the end, the child hugged the legs of the sweet-tempered woman and asked, "Mother, where is father?" "Over there." The gentle woman raised her hand and pointed at Wang Qing at the top of the mountain. The child immediately turned around and looked at her and laughed. The morning glow was filled with the laughter of an innocent child. The eyes in the holes of the silver mask slowly closed. Tears seeped out from the closed eyes, and a murmur came from under the mask. "I was wrong. Ruoyan, wait for me to come back." A stream of light suddenly shot from the top of the mountain to the sky. The strong airflow directly opened a cloud path in the sea of clouds and went far away. Chapter 1078. Immortal World, Paradise, Immortal Realm, Green Pear Palace. There were tens of thousands of mountains in the Paradise Immortal Realm, and there were also tens of thousands of buildings that were large or exquisite. However, there were not many places like the Green Pear Palace, which was as cold as autumn. Perhaps it was more appropriate to describe it as tranquil and serene. It did not have the kind of hostility that was full of intrigue or killing. At least this Green Pear Palace, which was shrouded in clouds and mist, looked so quiet and peaceful on the surface. However, this was only on the surface. The liveliness inside was incomparable to any other place in the entire fairyland of bliss. In the center of the Green Pear Palace, there was a large palace room. Under the moss-covered eaves, the old wooden door was tightly shut. Standing outside the wooden door, one could not hear any movement inside. But as soon as one entered the room, one would be attracted by the dancing and singing inside. In this huge palace room, the floor was polished to the point that it could reflect one's reflection. Countless singers were holding various musical instruments and singing, and a large number of dancers were showing their graceful figures. They were separated by a soundproof enchantment and did not disturb each other. However, all the soundproof enchantment in the palace room was removed today, because they had to fully cooperate with the main person personally chosen by the Immortal Emperor and the Immortal Empress. under the training of Palace Master Green Pear Palace. They had to cooperate with the main person again and again, but the main person was really stupid. Often, one action would cause everyone to keep repeating, "Damn it! I don't want to play anymore." A sad and indignant voice sounded in the palace room again. Yu Qianqiu collapsed on the ground and lay motionless on the smooth green jade floor, like a puddle of mud. When he first arrived here, his interest was piqued by the number of beauties and handsome men here. Due to his unattractive appearance, he felt a sense of accomplishment, like a crane standing in a flock of chickens. It should be said that a chicken stands in a flock of cranes. Imagine a chicken being surrounded by a flock of cranes. How great a sense of accomplishment would that chicken feel? But after being repeatedly trained by Green Pear Palace Master Qingyang for a few days, he felt like dying. Thus, he sadly realized that the free-range chicken was still the same free-range chicken. It was impossible for it to be prettier than a flock of red-crowned cranes. At most, it would be more eye-catching if one of them ran into the flock. I can barely make do with singing, but you actually want me to dance a classical dance? Choreograph your grandma. Yu Qianqiu lay on the ground, half dead. He looked at Qingyang, who was coldly staring at him from the side, and he was about to collapse. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes a few times, tilted his head to the side, and said angrily, "Don't look at me. I really can't play this thing. I'm not playing anymore." The drummers and dancers around him stopped, and everyone's eyes fell on him. Qingyang, who was wearing a light veil, looked at the person at her feet coldly, and said indifferently, "Don't say such words to me. In my Green Pear Palace, no one will stop you from leaving. If you really don't want to do this anymore, you can leave now, and we can save ourselves some trouble." Yu Qianqiu turned his head and looked at her, gritting his teeth. He had said similar words many times, but he was no match for her, so he had to obediently accept the training. He could only crawl up and continue as if his bones were broken. In the beginning, he was a little afraid of this woman, but after getting along with her for a long time, he realized that this woman was different from the people outside. In the words of his previous life, she was an artist who was obsessed with the art of singing and dancing. She did not care about the messy things outside of Green Pear Palace, and only lived in her own world. Because he understood this, he dared to roll around in this Green Pear Palace. Seeing his listless appearance, Qingyang furrowed her brows. She gestured with her arms and said, "You can't be like this. Your mentality is very important. You have to focus, you have to put your entire being into it." She pointed to the side and said, "You go to the side first, see how we do it, and feel it with your heart." Yu Qianqiu nodded repeatedly, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Then, he ran to the side and sat under a huge brown wooden pillar. The pillar was engraved with the words "green pears" in the wilting. He sat on the 2 steps of green jade and looked at the group of professionals. He sighed in his heart. That Jin Taizong really lived the life of an emperor, and he even had a professional royal song and dance troupe to entertain him. As expected of a rich and powerful life, Qingyang clapped her hands, making a crisp sound, and then made a beautiful hand gesture. The singers and dancers quickly changed their formation, and the heart-stirring chords formed by several musical instruments sounded, and the atmosphere in the palace suddenly became relaxed and carefree. Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled, and he felt that this tune was very familiar. The group of dancers all had charming smiles on their faces as they danced around Qingyang. Their unbridled joy were clear to see. Qingyang's unsmiling face melted like an ancient iceberg, and her dance was very simple. She wandered around the group of dancers, and it seemed like she was dancing, but it didn't seem like she was dancing. It was as if she was free and unfettered in the world of mortals. Seeing this, Yu Qianqiu was stunned, and he only wanted to praise her. How fast she changed her expression, and how professional she was. Following the change of the tune, the men rolled to Qingyang's feet and began to form a formation. Qingyang leisurely stepped on the backs of the men and sat on the back of one of them. Her bare, slender, jade-like feet stepped on the back of another man. She rested her elbows on her knees and supported her cheeks with her palms. She tilted her head and looked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile. Then, She pretended to take an imaginary wine glass from a female dancer and tossed it around. She giggled and gently tapped her feet on the back of the male dancer. Her toes curved in a seductive arc, and she appeared to be very carefree. She gently laughed and began to sing the song that Yu Qianqiu was very familiar with. The world of mortals is so funny. Infatuation is the most boring. No matter how cold the wind is, I don't want to escape. No matter how beautiful the flowers are, I don't want them, let me float. Cry today, laugh tomorrow. I don't ask for anyone to understand, I'm full of pride. The song is singing, the dance is dancing, the night is long, and the dawn is looking for happiness. Yu Qianqiu was stunned, and he was immersed in the song, unable to extricate himself from it. After the song was finished, the music stopped, and the dancers left the stage. Qingyang returned to her expressionless face, and she walked over and asked, "What do you think after my arrangement?" Yu Qianqiu slowly came back to his senses. Sitting there, he looked at her and shook his head in amazement. After she added the harmony of other instruments to the monotonous music he had originally made, the song "Laughing at the World of Mortals" was performed incisively and vividly by her. After hearing and seeing it, people could fully feel the carefree feeling of laughing at the world of mortals. What was a professional? The person in front of him was a true professional, and the essence of the song was completely revealed. It was difficult for people not to be immersed in it. "How do you know this song?" Yu Qianqiu asked in surprise. "I heard it from the maid beside Ji Wu. It is said that she was originally your subordinate. I heard her sing a few of your songs, and they are indeed unique. However, the one I like the most is still the one I just heard. This song contains the state of mind that I have always wanted to pursue. Laughing at the world of mortals." Qingyang said lightly, "If I didn't really like you and wanted to see you, do you think I would bring an outsider to the Green Pear Palace?" "I see." Yu Qianqiu helplessly scratched his forehead. Needless to say, the person beside Ji Wu was undoubtedly Lu Yanqing. Qingyang looked at him and suddenly frowned. She shook her head in confusion and said, "After interacting with you for a few days, I really can't believe that a person with a mind like yours could compose a song like this. It is completely different from your words and actions. Music is the voice of the heart. I deeply suspect that this is not your doing. How could you possibly compose a song like this? However, I have never heard a similar song from the famous songs that the Immortal Palace has collected from the three realms, so I have no evidence to prove my suspicions." Yu Qianqiu looked at her speechlessly. What was a professional? An expert would know once they made their move. Her eyes could immediately tell that these songs were not composed by him. He wanted to honestly admit it, but when he thought about the fact that he was riding on a tiger and couldn't back down, it would be no different from deliberately lying to Jin Tai. Thus, he decided not to admit it even if he was beaten to death. However, Qingyang's tone suddenly changed. She sighed and said, "However, when I was in the Green Pear Palace and saw your new song with my own ears, I understood that this song was clearly created by you after you received the Immortal Emperor's decree. You flattered and flattered the Immortal Emperor and the Immortal Empress. It should not have been plagiarized from someone else. Only then did I believe that there are people called geniuses in this world. It is my honor to be able to dance with you." "Ah." Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched. He scratched his face and said awkwardly, "It's not as exaggerated as you say, right? It should be my honor." He couldn't understand why women liked this kind of whining thing. If it wasn't for the fact that he saw Bai Suzhen moaning in that cave, and that he wanted to get close to a beautiful woman, who would have thought that he would make this kind of thing? He didn't think that this kind of thing would be so popular here. From this, it could be seen how lacking the spiritual and cultural life of this world was. The effect of this kind of thing was probably greatly reduced in his previous life. You don't need to be modest. Good is good, but there are also bad points. Even though you are a genius, you are not able to make good use of it. I can see that your foundation in this area is very poor, and you are completely relying on your innate talent." Qingyang suddenly paused and her expression became serious. She stared at Yu Qianqiu and said in a serious tone, "Actually, with your talent in this area, it is a waste to be the sect leader of the world commerce. If you are willing, after the Immortal Emperor's wedding, I can ask for you to join the Immortal Palace as the Vice Palace Lord of the Green Pear Palace. I guarantee that the cultivation resources you will obtain will not be less than what you would obtain by fighting outside. How about it? Chapter 1079. Yu Qianqiu was completely dumbfounded. In his heart, he lamented that the ancients did not deceive him. As expected, as long as one had a skill, one would not be afraid of traveling the world. However, he knew his own capabilities the best. What kind of *T talent did he have? It was enough for him to fool around. If he dared to take it seriously, he would be courting death. Moreover, he had never planned to become an actress. He was afraid that he would be caught in the unspoken rules. Thus he waved his hand and said, "No need, no need. You don't have to reject me so early. Think about it carefully before you give me an answer," Qingyang said seriously. "There's really no need." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand again to reject her. He leaned against the pillar behind him and smiled bitterly. "Your evaluation is too high. I really don't have the talent that you said. Moreover, to be honest, I don't like this line of work at all. If I'm not interested in something, how can I do well in the future? I appreciate your kindness." At this point, what else could Qingyang say? She wasn't the kind of person who liked to force others. She could only shake her head and sigh in regret. After silently looking at Yu Qianqiu for a while, she suddenly raised her hand and untied the light gauze on her upper body. Under the dumbfounded gaze of Yu Qianqiu, she took off her upper body. The light gauze fell to the ground, and only a green undergarment was left on her upper body. Her pair of white and tender arms were long and slender. Her shoulders and collarbones were moving up and down gently. That slender and soft waist that belonged to a dancer was glowing with a healthy luster. It was a different kind of charm. F***ck. It can't be. Yu Qianqiu's eyes almost popped out. He was completely speechless. He thought to himself, "You don't have to use dirty tricks just because you think I have talent. You don't have to use dirty tricks to get me into your line of work. Although I like it, I will definitely reject it." Qingyang, on the other hand, had a calm expression on her face. She approached Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting motionlessly. She stretched out her slender and beautiful arm and made an inviting gesture. "Inviting me to do this in front of everyone's eyes." Yu Qianqiu glanced around and found that everyone's expression seemed to be very used to it. The muscles on his face couldn't help but violently tremble. He immediately determined that this Green Pear Palace was a den of lust. He awkwardly smiled and refused. "I really appreciate your kindness, but I don't have the habit of doing that in front of everyone's eyes. Forget it." The meaning behind his words seemed to be that he could consider it when there was no one behind him. Qingyang immediately knew that he misunderstood. She glared at him and said, "What you said. Actually, when teaching a layman like you to dance, the less clothes you wear the better. This way, it will be easier to see if the lines of your body are natural and soft when you dance, and you can correct your mistakes or stiff postures in time, speeding up the progress of your practice." "Qingyang," Yu Qianqiu said. "Then why?" Qingyang was speechless. She explained helplessly, "Don't worry. I don't want to take advantage of you. When a man and a woman dance together, it is easier to reach the realm of body and mind. If it weren't for the fact that I don't have much time left, I wouldn't practice with him like this." "Really?" Yu Qianqiu still didn't believe it. Qingyang, who had always been serious, didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Look at his timid and reserved appearance. Why did it seem like she wanted to do something to him? "Do I look so scary?" She bit her lips and glared at him. "Of course it's true. I am a woman, but I am not afraid. You are a man. What are you afraid of?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the expressions of the people around him. He felt that what she said was true. He scratched his head awkwardly and said, "I am not afraid. I am just not used to it and feel shy." "You." Qingyang was annoyed and amused. She stretched out her hand again and made an inviting gesture. "Hurry up. I don't have time to waste with you." "Hee hee. Okay. Then I won't be polite." Yu Qianqiu laughed and grabbed her hand. He stood up. Because he was sitting on the ground, he let go of her hand and patted the dust off his butt. Such an action that seemed like that of an old farmer in the mortal world caused Qing Nyang's brows to furrow. To an extraordinary dancer like her, she really wasn't interested in such vulgar behavior. Moreover, she was going to have to dance with such a vulgar person. She forcefully suppressed her displeasure and reached out to take off Yu Qianqiu's clothes. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He crossed his arms to protect his chest. However, he quickly reacted and said awkwardly, "I'll do it myself. I'll do it myself." Thus, under Qing Yang's angry gaze, he finally took off his shirt, leaving behind only a tight-fitting white undershirt. After that he remained indifferent. "Take off your clothes," Qing Yang said sternly. Yu Qianqiu looked at his own body. He looked at her half-naked upper body and the undershirt. He couldn't help but mutter, "You are not even going to take off your clothes. Why do you want me to take off my clothes?" Qing Yang was exasperated, but the professionalism displayed by her subsequent actions caused Yu Qianqiu to panic. She turned her hand and was about to pull the knot of her doo-doo. She was really going to strip naked and start working. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu wasn't a beast. He let out a breath of cold air and quickly reached out to grab her hand. He repeatedly apologized. "My mouth is cheap. I was wrong. If you really took off all your clothes, I would definitely let my imagination run wild, and I wouldn't be able to practice well." "That's good. Don't be angry, I'll take it off." A hand swiftly tore off the white inner shirt on his upper body with a C sound. Due to his frequent practice of the animal dance, his muscles were not as strong as a bullfrog's. However, they were solid pieces of muscle. It was obvious that he was full of explosive power. The most peculiar part was his skin. After taking off his clothes, his skin had a faint and beautiful luster. It was as if there was some kind of colorful light flowing around his body. It was a very healthy skin color. He didn't know why. However, ever since he started practicing the 5 elemental secret arts, his skin would look better with every element stored in his body. Moreover, his skin would become smoother and smoother. All the beauties who had slept with him were envious. Qing Yang's gaze fell on his naked upper body. She couldn't help but stare blankly. She had seen many naked dancers, but she had never seen such healthy skin. Well, it would be more appropriate to say that it looked good. She only lost her mind for a moment. She quickly regained her composure with her professionalism. She turned around and made a hand gesture. A majestic and gentle music immediately started playing. Yu Qianqiu, who had already taken off his shirt, timidly followed behind her. Qing Yang suddenly turned around gracefully, her face already filled with an expression of incomparable adoration. She looked at him tenderly, and her jade-like arms stretched out, taking the initiative to hug his neck. This was a serious skin-to-skin contact. The two of them shivered. Yu Qianqiu was not used to this kind of skin-to-skin contact in front of so many people. However, he didn't say anything about it behind their backs. Qing Yang, on the other hand, experienced smooth skin for the first time. It was much smoother than her own skin. "Hold my waist tightly. Don't touch me. Turn your head towards me, look at me. Lower your chin a little, lower it a little more. Don't let your eyes wander. Look into my eyes, and look more affectionate." Under Qing Yang's careful guidance, Yu Qianqiu was like a block of wood. His hands and feet were big and loose. Not only was he hugging her tightly, but once he loosened his grip, it was like he was throwing something. It was truly a tragic sight to see him throw Qing Yang away. Although the people around them didn't see anything on the surface, they all secretly shook their heads. Could this block of wood really be used during the Celestial Emperor's wedding? They were very doubtful. It wasn't just them who were actively preparing for the day of the wedding. In the past month, the Immortal Palace had already sent invitations to all the sects in the Celestial Realm, big and small, inviting them to the Paradise of Bliss to participate in Jin Tai and Ji Wu's wedding. The entire Celestial Realm experienced a rare period of peace in this month. No matter which sect wanted to cause trouble for another sect, even the small sects that couldn't protect themselves, they would brazenly use the invitations sent by the Immortal Palace to repel their enemies. "If you dare to hit me, then you're stopping me from participating in the Celestial Emperor's wedding. You're going against the Celestial Emperor." For a time, There were almost no fights between sects in the celestial realm. It could be said that this was a rare occurrence. Although everyone knew that it was because of the Immortal Palace's reputation, some people felt strange. Why was it like the calm before the storm? In the blink of an eye, the date of the Celestial Emperor's wedding was approaching. All the sects were preparing to depart for the paradise of bliss. The sects that were far away, or those with lower cultivation levels and speed, had already set off early. No one dared to be careless about this matter. In order to show their respect to the Celestial Emperor, almost all the sects and merchant guilds in the celestial realm decided to have their sect masters personally lead people to congratulate the Celestial Emperor. Such a grand wedding celebration with such a huge influence could be said to be unprecedentedly grand. The entire celestial realm was paying close attention to it. In fact, the influence of the Celestial Emperor's wedding was not only in the celestial realm. In the underworld, some people or forces that had friendly relations with the Celestial Emperor, or the Immortal Palace, had sent people to congratulate the Celestial Emperor. For a time, the entrance to the underworld was unprecedentedly lively. Looking at the people from the underworld holding the underworld passage tokens issued by the Immortal Palace, and the people coming out of the underworld one after another, the guards of the Immortal Palace who were stationed here sighed in their hearts. They sighed that the influence of the Celestial Emperor was indeed extraordinary. It could be seen that even the people of the underworld were stirred up. Because of this, the army of the Dark Underworld also sent a large number of troops to strengthen the defense at the exit of the underworld, to prevent people from taking advantage of the opportunity to cause trouble. Just as the army of the Dark Underworld was strictly inspecting the people passing through the two worlds, a white light suddenly appeared in the sky. Its speed was extremely fast, and in a flash, it landed on the ancient inscription tablet that was engraved with 20 large bright red words not far from the exit of the underworld. Everyone was shocked. Whether it was the army of the Dark Underworld guarding this place, or the passers-by, they all looked up. They didn't know who was so bold as to act so recklessly at the entrance of the army of the Dark Underworld. It would have been fine if they didn't look, but after seeing the appearance of the person who came, almost everyone was shocked. They saw a man dressed in a white scholarly robe, standing at the edge of the ancient inscription tablet with his hands behind his back. He looked at the people entering and exiting the underworld with an indifferent expression. Chapter 1080. In reality, not many people knew who this person was. It could be said that most people didn't know who this person was. They didn't even know what his name was. However, this didn't prevent them from knowing who this person was. That legendary image immediately reminded them of who this person was. Someone in the Dark Nether army that was guarding this place gave an order. Then they all knelt down and shouted, "Greetings, Emperor of the Underworld." The surrounding people also knelt down and shouted. However, some only bowed slightly to show respect. The scene immediately became a scene of one person being the ruler. "Rise!" A clear voice echoed through the air. When everyone stood up, they only saw a white light shoot into the passageway to the underworld. The white-robed scholar on the tablet had already disappeared. Everyone looked at each other in dismay, then stared at the exit of the underworld in astonishment. At the exit of the underworld on the other side of the immortal world, the white-robed scholar floated out barefoot. There was not a speck of dust under his feet. Standing on the steps of the entrance, he felt the piercing sunlight. He used his hand to block it, and slightly raised his head to look at the bright sun in the sky. One of the golden-robed guards on both sides couldn't stand the scholar's careless and arrogant attitude. He immediately shouted angrily, "Someone show your token!" The scholar tilted his head and glanced at him indifferently. Then, he turned into a streak of light and disappeared. The guard who spoke was furious. He was about to send a signal for his men to kill the scholar, but he was stopped by a few of his colleagues. One of them hissed and waved his hand. "You don't want to live anymore. Do you know who he is? He is the supreme ruler of the underworld, the Emperor of the Underworld." The angry guard was stunned on the spot. Then a look of relief appeared on his face. If he really angered the Emperor of the Underworld, even if the Emperor of the Underworld killed him in front of everyone, he would have died in vain. Even the immortal emperor wouldn't be able to get justice for him. The majestic myriad saints' peak pierced through the clouds. And at the peak of the peak, a group of people walked out from the majestic myriad saints' palace, whispering to each other. When they came out, they turned into streaks of light and disappeared in all directions. These people were the upper echelons of Wan Gutong. After everyone left, Wan Ling sneakily sneaked out from behind a stone pillar and ran into the main hall. In the end, she bumped into the Wan Gutong sect master, Wan Buosheng, who had put on a healthy complexion, striding out in large strides. "Unruly girl, why are you in such a hurry?" Wan Buosheng glared at her. Wan Ling's eyes lit up as she asked, "Grandpa, where are you going? Aren't you asking the obvious?" "Of course, I'm going to Paradise Wonderland." Wan Buosheng was slightly startled as he said this. He looked at her with vigilance and asked, "Why are you asking this?" However, just as he expected, Wan Ling hugged his arm and cheered, "I'll go with Grandpa. Stop fooling around. The people attending this banquet are probably the sect leaders of the various sects in the immortal world. What are you doing there? There's nothing for you to play with there. What are you doing?" Wan Buosheng waved her hand away and shouted, "Go do what you should be doing. Grandpa, let me explain." Wan Ling anxiously grabbed his arm again and spilled out the reason. "This time, I made a bet with Hidden Dragon Manor's Duke Long Yu's granddaughter, Long Xiaojiu. Whoever can't attend the immortal emperor's wedding has to be the other party's maid for a month. Grandpa, can you bear to see Ling Er lose the bet and suffer such humiliation? What's the difference between me and Grandpa being humiliated and Wan Gutong being humiliated? Moreover, the invitation didn't limit the number of people attending the banquet. So what's wrong with bringing one more person? Can't you just treat it as bringing Ling Er to broaden her horizons? This is an unprecedented grand wedding of the immortal emperor. If you miss it, there won't be a next time." "You!" Wan Buosheng stared at her speechlessly. After a long while he finally yelled, "Nonsense!" At this time, the entire immortal world was in an uproar. Not only did Wan Gutong's sect master, Wan Buosheng, personally come to the immortal emperor's wedding, more than 10,000 sect masters of various sects had prepared their gifts and left their sects, heading towards the immortal realm of bliss from all directions. Even the 12 immortal monarchs under the immortal emperor's command in the 12 immortal prefectures all came to attend the banquet. In the immortal world, no matter where they were, when they saw the light streaking across the sky towards the immortal realm of bliss, they would all sigh and speculate that it must be the people going to attend the banquet. The immortal emperor's wedding. This was definitely an unprecedented grand banquet in the immortal world. The immortal realm of bliss had become the focus of the entire immortal world, causing countless people to exclaim in admiration. In the ghost world, more than 10 immortal cultivators hurried across the sky together. Suddenly, a green light streaked across the night sky, chasing after a group of people. Startled, the group of people hurriedly stood back to back in the sky, ready for battle. The green light stopped in front of everyone, and a green-robed old man with a thin face appeared. He glanced at the group of people indifferently and asked directly, "Where is the exit from the ghost world to the immortal world?" The group of people looked at each other and found that no one could see through this person's cultivation. They were all a little surprised. The person in the lead, who was probably the leader of the group, respectfully cupped his hands towards the green-robed old man and said, "Judging from your appearance, you are not from the ghost world, so you should also be a cultivator from the immortal world. Since you can come to the ghost world from the immortal world, why don't you know the way back? And judging from your cultivation, you are definitely not a nobody in the immortal world. May I ask which sect in the immortal world are you an expert from?" The green-robed old man glanced at him and said slowly, "This old man is Bai Changchun, from the human world." "From the human world? Bai Changchun?" The person in the lead was stunned and didn't understand what it meant for a moment. But someone beside him was shocked, and he quickly looked up and down at Bai Changchun's appearance. He suddenly exclaimed, "You are the Bai Changchun who challenged the Emperor of the Netherworld." As soon as this was said, everyone's eyes immediately swept over Bai Changchun. and they found that his appearance was indeed very similar to the Bai Changchun in the rumors. Immediately, all of them were shocked to the point that they couldn't speak. This wasn't a topic that Bai Changchun wanted to talk about at all, so he asked again. This old man wants to go to the immortal world. Who can show this old man the way? His tone was already slightly impatient. Everyone was shocked. This madman was famous in the ghost world. He dared to fight the emperor of the netherworld, so it was naturally not difficult for him to deal with them. The person in the lead immediately pointed in the direction of his group and said, "Go straight in that direction, and you will see the passage between the immortal world and the netherworld. Once you go out, you will be in the immortal world." But he pretended to look up and down at Bai Changchun. But what? Bai Changchun's cold gaze pressed over like lightning. The person in the lead cupped his hands and said, "Even though the passage between the immortal world and the netherworld is there, it is heavily guarded now. If you don't have a passage token to the netherworld, I'm afraid it won't be so easy to go out. Of course, with your cultivation, it's naturally not a problem to go out by force. But if you alarm a large number of experts from the netherworld, or the emperor of the netherworld, I presume that's something that you don't want to see happen. Not to mention without a passage token to the netherworld, even if you leave the netherworld, it will be troublesome at the exit of the immortal world. What if you make a commotion and cause the experts of both the immortal world and the netherworld to?" He revealed a smile that was filled with deep meaning, and he seemed to be saying that you ought to know what the consequences would be. The people around him looked at him with slight puzzlement, and they didn't know why he was so long-winded. How good would it be to send this person away as soon as possible? There was no need to cause more trouble. "Oh," Bai Changchun dragged out an "oh," and then he looked ahead and said indifferently, "So what?" That person immediately took out a black token and offered it up with both hands in a fawning manner. "I've long heard of your great name, and I've always admired you. To be able to see your true appearance today is truly a blessing of 3 lifetimes. I have an extra passage token to the netherworld here, and I'm willing to give it to you for free to help you leave the netherworld smoothly to express my admiration for you." With such an action, the people around him were even more confused. Wasn't he deliberately causing trouble for himself? Immediately, someone secretly sent a voice transmission to warn him. "Elder, this person is a wanted criminal by the Dark Netherworld Army. Once your actions are leaked, it will bring great trouble to the sect. Please reconsider. You'd better learn from me." That person quickly replied with a voice transmission. "It's precisely because this person is a wanted criminal by the Dark Netherworld Army that we accidentally exposed his identity. Aren't you afraid that he will kill us to silence us? Think about it. Even the 4 great Netherworld generals together aren't a match for him. What can we do to him? This is called showing goodwill on purpose to make him lower his guard. After he leaves, haha. Have you forgotten the huge bounty and great benefits offered by the Dark Netherworld Army?" The former immediately came to a sudden realization and secretly flattered. "Elder is indeed wise. Not only can you avert danger, but you can also take advantage of the situation to make a fortune. When you return to the sect, it will definitely be a great merit. Truly brilliant. This junior has learned his lesson. Then I won't stand on ceremony." Bai Changchun raised his hand and took the netherworld passage token from the other party's hand. He held it and looked at it repeatedly. Then he raised his eyebrows and stared at that person, saying indifferently, "Just based on you guys, I wouldn't bother to make a fuss about it. But since you're unaccountably solicitous, you must be hiding evil intentions. Looks like I can't let you guys live." Ah! Everyone was shocked. As long as they weren't fools, they would be able to understand what he meant. That person who was solicitous turned pale with fright and said, "You, what do you want to do? How can you repay kindness with enmity?" However, seeing that Bai Changchun's expression was completely unmoved, he immediately panicked and shouted, "Stop him!" Then he turned around and wanted to run. Humph! A sonorous cold snort rang out. Everyone immediately felt a majestic and enormous pressure pressing down on them from all directions, suppressing them to the point that they couldn't move at all. Bai Changchun didn't want to waste any more time with them. He casually waved his green robe sleeve, and a mysterious force that seemed to be contained in the heavenly barrier wrapped around the people, who were suppressed to the point that they couldn't move. In an instant, more than 10 people were torn into pieces of flesh and blood. Not even a single bone was left intact. The group of people didn't even have time to scream before they lost their lives. Amidst the rain of blood, Bai Changchun didn't take another look. He waved his sleeve and transformed into a stream of light that rapidly went far away. Chapter 1081. Tomorrow is the wedding day of the immortal emperor. The entire immortal world is celebrating. I wonder what kind of grand occasion the paradise immortal realm will be. Unfortunately, with our cultivation, we are not qualified to attend the banquet. We can only look forward to it. The closer they got to the exit between the underworld and the immortal world, the more envious words they heard. Bai Changchun, who was flying past these people, frowned and muttered to himself, "Tomorrow." A meditation cultivator, wearing a large red shawl, suddenly felt something rushing at him at high speed. Just as he reacted, he felt a strong gust of wind, causing him to spin several times in the air. When he calmed down, he found that the shawl he was wearing had disappeared. It was obvious that it had been snatched by someone passing by. This meditation cultivator was about to shout who dared to snatch his things, but after seeing the flash of light, he immediately shut his mouth. Judging from the speed of the other party, he could tell that the other party's cultivation was far higher than his. If he really called the other party back, he was afraid that at that time, it would not only be snatching the shawl, but also taking his life. However, what made him scratch his head was that his shawl was just an ordinary shawl. Why would such an expert want to snatch such an inconspicuous thing? It didn't matter if he couldn't figure it out. Bai Changchun, who was flying at high speed, suddenly unfolded the blood-red shawl in his hand against the wind. With a hua sound, it shook in like a red cloud. He rushed over and wrapped it around his shoulders to cover his green robe. He directly flashed towards the heavily guarded exit of the underworld below. Two groups of people were verifying the pass tokens at the exit of the underworld in front of him. After Bai Changchun landed, he glanced at the people in front of him and took out the pass token that had been verified. After confirming that it was the same as the one in his hand, he looked straight ahead and walked over with large strides. In fact, with his ability, the guarding dark underworld army in front of him could not stop him at all. But he was not the kind of person who was inflexible to the point of not knowing how to adapt. It was an urgent matter. Knowing that tomorrow was the day of Queen Jin's wedding, it would take some time to get to the immortal palace. He didn't want to be entangled by trivial matters on the way, so he dressed up like this. Otherwise, he would have disdained to dress like this. The first two groups of people entered the swirling black light in the cave one after another and disappeared. A heavily armored general of the Onyx army stood in the middle of the road and stared at Bai Changchun with an awe-inspiring aura. In the end, he discovered that he could not see through this person's cultivation at all, so he immediately retracted his aura a little. Just as he was about to ask the other party to show him the netherworld token, a black light flashed out from the gap of the person's blood-red cape, and a netherworld token floated in front of him. The general was slightly taken aback by Bai Changchun's arrogant behavior under the heavy pressure of the army of the dark underworld. He looked at Bai Changchun meaningfully, grabbed the token and checked it. After confirming that there was no problem, he returned the token and made way for Bai Changchun. He even extended his hand and made an inviting gesture. Throughout the whole process, Bai Changchun did not need to shout at ordinary people. However, Bai Changchun did not appreciate his kindness. He had already brushed past him and did not even look at him from the beginning to the end. He flashed into the swirling black light in the cave ahead. A red cloud floated out of the fairy realm's exit. After checking the token, Bai Changchun stared at the group of people who had just left and chased after them. In the pure paradise fairyland, inside the crystal palace of the Empress of Immortals, the three people in the courtyard looked at the immortal palace that was looming in the clouds. Does it really have to be like this? Yi Xuejuan asked dejectedly, his head lowered with a depressed look. Lu Yanqing was silent on the side. Brother Yi, you don't have to persuade me anymore. We have no choice. Jiwoo stared angrily at the immortal palace in the sky, gritted her teeth and said, "Isn't it just marrying her? He can have my body, but not my heart." Yi Xuejuan shook his head in grief and indignation. How stupid is that? Lu Yanqing's expression was touched when she heard the words. Her lips moved slightly, and she stopped for a while. However, she seemed to think of something again. She suppressed the impulse to speak, and silently lowered her head, and bit her lips. Stupid. Jiwoo sneered and said, "One day, I will make Jin Tai regret his stupid decision today. What he forced on me, and what he did to Brother Yi, I will make him pay double. With the identity of the immortal empress, I can actually do a lot of things." Yi Xuejuan's words stopped at the tip of his tongue. A ray of light shot out from the immortal palace, and landed outside the crystal palace. Nie Xiaoqian, the chief of internal affairs of the immortal palace, led 8 golden-robed maids in. They then stood in a row and saluted Jiwoo in unison. "Greetings, immortal empress." Jiwoo snorted coldly. "How dare Chief Nie come in person? Are you here to urge me or force me?" Nie Xiaoqian smiled and said, "It was this old servant's negligence. Those 2 insensible servants have been dealt with by me, and the immortal emperor has also reprimanded this old servant." She bowed and said, "This old servant welcomes the immortal empress to the immortal palace. What's the hurry? It hasn't started yet, right?" Jiwoo turned sideways. The immortal palace had already sent 2 maids to invite her, but she sent them back. Nie Xiaoqian smiled apologetically and said, "When the immortal empress arrives at the immortal palace, the guards outside the paradise fairyland will let in the sect leaders who came to congratulate. Moreover, the immortal emperor has ordered that the immortal empress will be the mother of the world, so we must dress up well for the immortal empress. So please don't make things difficult for me. I can go too. Could it be that the 2 slaves didn't tell you what I said?" Jiwoo asked without turning her head around. Nie Xiaoqian looked at Yi Xuejuan and Lu Yanqing. She smiled and saluted again. "The immortal emperor has reprimanded me, saying that it is normal for the immortal empress to have 2 trusted people around her." She looked at Yi Xuejuan meaningfully and said, "But I have something inappropriate to say. The immortal empress also knows the immortal emperor's temper. I am afraid that someone around you will do something inappropriate to annoy the immortal emperor and implicate the immortal empress." The meaning of these words was obvious. There was no doubt that it was a warning to some people not to cause trouble at the immortal emperor's wedding celebration. This time they were facing the world. Whoever made the immortal emperor lose face in public would not only be themselves, but Jiwoo would also be unlucky. Yi Xuejuan was furious. "Old woman Nie, what do you mean?" Jiwoo turned around and stared at Nie Xiaoqian asking, "Are you threatening me?" "I dare not." Nie Xiaoqian bowed slightly and turned her head to the people behind her. "Escort the immortal empress and her trusted followers to the immortal palace." Her tone was firm. The 8 maids immediately rushed forward. Jiwoo shouted angrily, "Get out of my way. I can walk by myself." Nie Xiaoqian's eyes turned cold as she flew towards the immortal palace in the sky. She glanced at Yi Xuejuan and Lu Yanqing, who were trembling with fear. She waved her hand and said, "Take them away." She then chased after Jiwoo. Yi Xuejuan and Lu Yanqing were immediately restrained by the 8 maids and forced to return to the immortal palace. In the wilderness outside the mountains of Paradise Wonderland, there were many people. The leaders of various sects in the immortal realm had gathered here. They had been waiting for a long time, seeing that the 12 immortal monarchs had swaggered in, but no one was allowed to enter after a long time. Some people were slightly unhappy, but they dared not express their anger. The group of people who were qualified to stand in the front row were naturally the leaders of the big sects in the immortal realm. The Heartless Palace's sect master, Wang Qing, who was dressed in a blue robe and had long unrestrained hair, was wearing a silver mask. He naturally stood in the front row with his hands folded over his abdomen. He stood there as straight as a pencil without saying a word. The leader of Wan Gutong, Wan Bosheng, who sat at the top of the Chamber of Commerce, stood on the left of Wang Qing. Behind him was Wan Ling, who appeared at the wrong time. On the left of Wan Bo Sheng was the leader of the Hidden Dragon Manor, Long Sheng, who sat at the second position in the Chamber of Commerce. Behind him was a woman who appeared at the wrong time, Long Xiaojiu. Thus, the two rivals in love stood side by side. It was rare that Long Xiaojiu did not attack each other. It took Long Xiaojiu more effort to come this time than Wan Ling. If Long Sheng did not know that this girl's bet implicated the face of the Hidden Dragon Manor, he would not have brought her. However, the price Long Xiaojiu had to pay was heavy. After the bet, she would be detained and reflect on her mistakes for 10 years. However, Long Xiaojiu naturally would not tell Wan Ling about this embarrassing matter. At this moment, the two girls were squeezed in the middle of a group of experts, and were as obedient as two little quails. However, they could not help but secretly size up the mysterious man in the silver mask in the front row. The two girls had heard of this extremely cruel and terrifying person, who killed his wife and son, but they could not help but want to see his true face under the mask. Dang! A clear and melodious sound of a bell reverberated endlessly between heaven and earth. A rainbow bridge that was 100 meters wide hung directly in front of everyone from afar. It was extremely magical. Countless golden-robed guards flew over in a densely packed manner. One after another, they stood on both sides of the rainbow bridge. Every 100 meters, there would be a pair of guards facing each other. A golden flowing light quickly flew over along the rainbow bridge. Wu Xiong appeared at the head of the bridge and laughed heartily. He cupped his hands and said, "Please forgive me for neglecting you esteemed guests. On behalf of the Immortal Palace, I respectfully welcome the esteemed guests outside the mountain gate. Everyone, please follow along the rainbow bridge. Inside, we have already prepared bejeweled wine for you. Please." He made a welcoming gesture, and then flashed to the side to greet them with cupped fists. Wang Qing was the first to turn into a stream of light and fly along the rainbow bridge. The people behind him followed one after another. However, the people behind him seemed to be much more polite than Wang Qing. When they passed by Wu Xiong, they would slightly slow down and return the greeting with cupped fists. Only then did they quickly follow the rainbow bridge into the distance. The golden-robed guards on both sides of the rainbow bridge all made a welcoming gesture with cupped fists and stood there motionlessly. After the rainbow bridge went deep into the Paradise Immortal realm, it suddenly split from the center. Half of it extended towards the Immortal Palace in the sky, and the other half suddenly extended towards the mountain peak that was cut in half at the waist below the Immortal Palace. One could see that the huge platform was filled with stone banquets, and there was a faint fragrance of fine wine in the air. Chapter 1082. In the middle of the two rainbow bridges, a line of golden characters appeared, indicating that the sects in the top 1,000 in the immortal world would be seated in the Immortal Palace in the sky, while the sects below the 1,000 would be seated below. When the sect leaders of the various sects arrived here, they immediately knew who was better and who was worse. Most of them couldn't help but look up at the majestic Immortal Palace in the distance and felt a little regretful. After all, there weren't many outsiders who could see the true appearance of the Immortal Palace. If they missed this opportunity, they were afraid that there wouldn't be another chance in the future. However, there were some things that they couldn't control. On the contrary, those sects that were barely ranked in the top 1,000 were a little surprised. In the past, in some occasions, the ranking was often ranked in the top 50 or 100, at most within the top 200. They didn't expect that even these sects that were ranked in the top 1,000 would have the opportunity to enter the Immortal Palace. From this, it could be seen that the Immortal Palace was preparing for a grand wedding celebration. For them, to be able to see the true appearance of the Immortal Palace was also an honor. After going back, they would have the capital to brag about it, so it wouldn't be considered as a wasted trip. However, for the sect leaders of the top sects, many of them had been summoned by the Immortal Emperor at the Immortal Palace. Although it was called a summon, it was actually a disguised form of submission. For these proud and arrogant people, the Immortal Palace represented a period of shame in their lives. Being able to sit in the Immortal Palace was nothing to be happy about. At the entrance of the Golden World and the Rainbow Bridge, the Grand Commander of the Immortal Palace, Li, personally stood on the side to welcome the guests. On the other side, there was a marked place for guests to receive gifts. There was a row of guards helping the Immortal Emperor to receive the wedding gifts. In the distance, there was a magnificent immortal palace that was glistening with multicolored light, as well as this dazzling and magnificent golden kingdom. This caused those sect leaders who had just arrived to be extremely shocked. Perhaps the sects didn't lack such worldly things like gold, but it was impossible for them to take out so much gold. What was called grandeur? This was the true grandeur of an emperor. Anything that was accumulated to the extreme was enough to shake people's hearts. Under the lead of the Immortal Palace's guards, the group walked for almost an hour before they reached the bottom of the steps of the majestic Immortal Palace. Most of them were shocked by the Immortal Palace's silent sovereign king's aura. From the bottom to the top of the 36th step, there were 6 sets of 12 long golden tables on each side. The tables were already filled with fine wine and delicacies. At the center of the 36th step, there were 2 extremely luxurious dragon and phoenix thrones, and the delicacies on the table were even more sumptuous. The 12 seats below were naturally prepared for the 12 great immortal monarchs. As for the 2 dragon and phoenix thrones in the middle, who would dare to sit on them except for Jin Tai and Ji Wu? On both sides of the stairs, 10 long rows of golden tables were set up. There were a total of 20 rows on both sides, and each row had 50 seats, exactly 1,000 seats. In the middle, there was a 100-meter-wide aisle in the air. Under the guidance of the guards of the Immortal Palace, they began to take their seats according to the ranking of their sections. The sect leader of the Heartless Palace, Wang Qing, sat on the first seat on the left side of the steps, while Wan Buosheng sat on the first seat opposite of Wang Qing. Long Sheng of the Hidden Dragon Villa was right next to Wan Buosheng. At this time, nearly 1,000 people couldn't help but look at Wan Buosheng and Long Sheng, because the 2 of them were too conspicuous. Everyone came alone, but the 2 of them brought a girl. Moreover, it was the pair of clowns who were notorious for fighting for a man's affections in the immortal world. Why did it feel like they were making a scene? Some people who had a good relationship with the 2 of them secretly sent messages to them, admiring them. You 2 old guys really have guts. The faces of the Sheng and the Sheng were slightly dark, and they happened to be leaning against each other, so it was impossible for them not to be conspicuous. Even Wang Qing, who was sitting opposite of them, couldn't help but look at the 2 old guys. In fact, they did not expect that the Immortal Palace would have such a clear seating arrangement. They had thought that it would be fine to let the 2 juniors mingle with the crowd of tens of thousands of sects to attend the banquet. Who would have thought that when they arrived in front of the Immortal Palace, there would be more than 9,000 sects divided according to their sects, and the remaining 1,000 people were assigned 1 position for each sect. Now there would be something to see. The 2 old guys were full of regret. If they had known this earlier, they would have asked Wu Xiong when they were outside the Paradise Immortal Realm. After knowing the situation, they would immediately ask the 2 girls to leave. Now it was hard to get off the tiger. Fortunately, the Immortal Palace was not stingy. The length of the long golden table was enough to accommodate 2 people, and the guards of the Immortal Palace didn't express any doubts about the 2 extra girls. However, the 2 girls were cramped and didn't dare to raise their heads. Under the pressure of the Immortal Palace, they realized how small they were, and that they had caused trouble. Their intestines were green with regret. The 2 girls' ears were filled with the angry voices of the 2 sect leaders, who had nowhere to vent their anger. Their heads were so low that they almost hit the table. In the magnificent imperial garden of the Immortal Palace, a white-robed scholar strolled barefoot with his hands clasped behind his back on a small path in the garden. He looked at the garden that was filled with all kinds of flowers, trees, and pavilions that were carved out of gold. Everywhere was golden and dazzling. As he wandered, he saw Jin Tai, who was walking from the front palace to the back palace. He immediately walked to the middle of the road and blocked Jin Tai's way. Jin Tai's slender eyes shone brightly, and he said in a deep voice, "I'm warning you, don't make trouble at this time. I'm here to congratulate you on your wedding. Why would I come to make trouble?" Bai Qi said with a smile, and reached out to touch the golden robe embroidered with dragons and clouds. Jin Tai unceremoniously waved his hand to block the other's demonic claws, and said coldly, "Are you so kind? Have I been blind for so many years? Humph. It's more likely that the sun has risen in the underworld. You don't come without a reason. If you have something to say, just say it. If you don't believe me, I can't do anything." "All right." Bai Qi waved his hand and pointed at everything around him that was shining with gold, and said, "Other people's imperial garden is full of exotic flowers and plants. You have nothing but gold here. I'm giving you face by saying you're vulgar. Will your bride be able to endure your perverted fetish? Ji Wu, that girl, is a rare beauty in the world. Aren't you afraid that you'll ruin her on your golden bed? Bai Qi, this is not a place for you to behave atrociously. Get out of my way." Jin Tai shouted in a deep voice. Bai Qi chuckled and got out of the way. After watching Jin Tai's figure disappear into the harem, he crossed his arms and mumbled to himself with an annoyed expression. That boy with a messy fate was chosen by Jin Tai to sing. In the vast golden square below the immortal palace, countless golden-robed guards suddenly appeared from all directions. They lined up neatly and stood there motionlessly, almost filling the entire square. It gave the sect leaders of the various sects a great deal of pressure, as if they were surrounded. Just as the heads of the various sects were looking around, a burst of heavenly music suddenly rang out in the entire square, stirring everyone's hearts. A group of men and women wearing light muslin, or with vigorous bodies, landed on the 100-meter-wide passageway in the middle. As soon as they landed, they immediately danced to the fluttering heavenly music, displaying their enchanting dance postures. It was very pleasing to the eye, and the atmosphere of the entire square immediately relaxed. Suddenly, everyone raised their heads to look at the 100-meter-high steps. They saw that the mighty 12 immortal monarchs had split into 2 rows and walked down from the high steps. When they were stationed in one area, they all wore different clothes, but now they all wore the golden woven clothes of the immortal palace. The 12 immortal monarchs walked down step by step, directly facing the crowd below, and sat down in their seats. Then, a large group of golden-robed men appeared on the top of the 100-meter-high steps. As the 2 groups of people split into 2 groups and walked down the steps in an orderly manner, the sect leaders of the various sects immediately gasped. These people were the palace lords of the 3,600 mountains in the pure paradise immortal realm. There were over 3,000 of them, and the weakest of them was at the early immortal emperor realm. They all listened to the orders of the immortal emperor, and they were the central force of the immortal palace that truly deterred the entire immortal realm. For example, the positions of the 12 immortal monarchs and immortal palace commanders and protectors were mostly vacant, and most of them were selected from among these people. In just a short while, more than 3,000 experts had separated along the stairs and stood on both sides of the stairs. The sect leaders below all felt a little uncomfortable being stared at by these people. However, before the first wave subsided, another wave arose. The 24 protectors of the immortal palace were split into 2 rows, each with 12 people walking down the steps. Finally, they stood on both sides of the steps that corresponded to the number of steps. That was not all. At the top of the steps, 6 people stood side by side. After a short pause, they walked down in unison. These 6 people were the 6 great commanders of the immortal palace. Wu Xiong and Deming Luan, who led the Chamber of Commerce Alliance, were among them. The 6 of them walked until they were 18 steps away from the 12 immortal monarchs and stopped. Everyone looked at the top of the steps again. The figure of Nie Xiaoqian, the chief steward of internal affairs of the immortal palace, stood alone. After glancing down coldly, she said in a clear voice, "The immortal emperor and the immortal empress have arrived." Her voice resounded through the entire immortal palace. The 12 immortal monarchs on the 36th step suddenly stood up and turned around. The 6 great commanders on the 48th step turned around. The 24 protectors on both sides of the steps turned around. The more than 3,000 palace lords of the Paradise of Bliss on each side of the 36th step turned around. Countless immortal palace guards all over the square turned around. Everyone looked at the chief steward of internal affairs, Nie Xiaoqian, who was on the steps. Under such an imposing manner, thousands of sect leaders stood up subconsciously. Wang Qing, who was in the seat of honor, paused for a moment, but still stood up. At the center of everyone's attention, a man and a woman in dragon and phoenix golden robes appeared on the left and right of the chief steward of internal affairs. They looked down with incomparable dignity. Nie Xiaoqian did not dare to stand side by side with the two of them. She walked down 3 steps in a row. After lowering her head, she glanced at the people below and said, "Welcome, Immortal Emperor and Immortal Empress." Chapter 1083. The ethereal celestial music had long since stopped, and the dancing men and women all stood with their hands clasped behind their backs. Nie Xiaoqian quickly walked to the side and knelt to the men and women high above. She respectfully and loudly shouted, "Your subjects congratulate Immortal Emperor and Immortal Empress on your wedding." She was the first to congratulate them, and the others just had to follow suit. However, to the thousands of sect leaders of the various sects, it was somewhat difficult for them to accept the words, "Your Majesty." Once they said it while kneeling, it was undoubtedly a sign that they were kneeling and bowing to the sect leader, completely submitting to him. However, before they could think too much about it, the palace lords of the 3,600 mountains of the immortal realm of bliss, on both sides of the platform, had already knelt down on one knee in front of the lofty men and women. The 24 protectors had already knelt down on one knee, the 6 commanders had knelt down on one knee, the 12 immortal monarchs had also knelt down on one knee. Under such tremendous pressure, many of the 1,000 sect leaders couldn't bear it any longer. Their knees buckled and they finally knelt. With someone taking the lead, the pressure was even greater for the others. Like a stone that set off 1,000 ripples, almost all of them knelt down one after the other. Although the few sect leaders who were ranked at the very top of the rankings had gloomy expressions on their faces, they had no choice but to slowly knelt down on one knee. Wang Qing stood straight and slowly swept his gaze across the countless experts of the immortal palace on either side of the stairs. Finally, his gaze met the cold and aloof gaze of the man high above. His eyes flickered, and he slowly knelt down as well. Directly below the floating immortal palace, there was a large mirror projection projected by some kind of magic treasure, projecting everything that was happening in the golden world above everyone's heads. Even the voices that were being spoken could be heard clearly. Nearly 10,000 sect leaders of the immortal world all knelt down under the pressure. "Your subjects congratulate Immortal Emperor and Immortal Empress on your wedding. Your subjects congratulate Immortal Emperor and Immortal Empress on your wedding." Tens of thousands of people in the sky and on the ground shouted the same words in unison, and their voices echoed between heaven and earth for a long time. The momentum of unifying the world was concentrated on one person, and the woman beside him was the one who shared it. Jin Tai seemed to enjoy the feeling of having tens of thousands of people submit to him. He swept his gaze over the crowd for a long time before glancing at Ji Wu beside him. Today Ji Wu was very beautiful. She was wearing a dazzlingly gorgeous golden robe that accentuated her beautiful figure and exuded an indescribably noble aura. Some of the 12 immortal monarchs kneeling on the steps had ugly expressions. In the magnificent immortal palace, a white-robed scholar slowly paced in front of the window sill of the top floor, looking indifferently at the scene below. Suddenly he sneered, shook his head slightly, and said to himself, "This guy just likes to put on this kind of scene. Who doesn't know that you are Immortal Emperor Jin Tai? Why do you have to be so ostentatious? Do you think there are too few people who hate you?" Under Nie Xiaoqian's respectful guidance, the Immortal Emperor and Immortal Empress finally sat on the dragon and phoenix thrones in the center of the steps. Yi Shuijun and Lu Yanqing silently stood on either side of the thrones. Jin Tai calmly sat on his throne, glanced at Ji Wu, who was sitting beside him with an expressionless face, and said with a dignified aura, "You may all rise." His tone was indifferent, but it clearly drilled into everyone's ears. It was completely the tone of an emperor. "Thank you, Immortal Emperor." Cheers reverberated in the sky and earth, Everyone stood up and returned to their positions. After kneeling for such a long time, although nothing could be seen on the surface, none of them felt comfortable in their hearts. Wang Qing, I didn't expect your cultivation to have reached the late immortal emperor stage. Your progress is amazing. Jin Tai suddenly stared at Wang Qing and said lightly. Everyone heard this and stared at Jin Tai. Many people were a little surprised. In fact, some people with cultivation at Wan Buoxing's level had already seen that Wang Qing's cultivation had broken through the intermediate immortal emperor stage. Before this, they were still wondering if they could get past Jin Tai. They didn't expect that Jin Tai would directly say it before the wedding ceremony. Some sect leaders, who were also intermediate immortal emperors, couldn't help exchanging glances with each other. They felt sorry for Wang Qing in their hearts. Could it be that Jin Tai was so intolerant that he wanted to act up during his own wedding ceremony? Wang Qing, who was about to sit down, slowly stood up again. His silver mask was very eye-catching in this golden world. He had already prepared for the worst before coming. So he calmly clasped his hands at Jin Tai and said, Thank you for your praise, immortal emperor. I can't accept your amazing progress in front of an immortal emperor. Jin Tai's eyes flickered, as if he was saying that it's good that you know. He picked up the wine glass on the table and slightly raised it towards Ji Wu, who was beside him. Ji Wu expressionlessly picked up the wine glass on the table, as if she was the husband's wife. Everyone came from far away to congratulate me. I'm very pleased. Jin Tai and Ji Wu raised their cups and said, Everyone, let's drink this cup. The people seated below all raised their cups and stood up, accompanying these two supreme dragons and phoenixes, in toasting a cup of fine wine. Jin Tai then waved his wine cup and said to everyone, As you wish. Everyone then sat down again. But it seemed that not many people could do so. At this time, Nie Xiaoqian, as the general manager, walked to the dragon and phoenix throne and looked around at everyone. On such a beautiful occasion, the wine and wine are not enough to enjoy to the fullest. Let's add to it with song and dance. World Commerce Sect leader Yu Qianqiu was very happy to hear about the wedding of Immortal Emperor and Immortal Empress. He spared no effort to travel the immortal and nether realms, and painstakingly compose beautiful songs to present to Immortal Emperor and Immortal Empress wedding. The Immortal Emperor is grateful for his loyalty, and specially issued a decree to let him perform the opening song of the wedding ceremony to reward everyone. After she finished speaking, she retreated to the side, announcing the start of the wedding ceremony. The sect leaders of the various sects who were present all guarded their mountain gates tightly. Almost none of them had seen Yu Qianqiu before. At this moment, they all secretly glanced at each other with a strange expression. They all wanted to see how many eyes and arms Yu Qianqiu, who had caused such a ruckus in the immortal and netherworld, had to actually come here to flatter them. Wan Buoxing and Wan Ling looked at each other and did not show anything. Until now, they still regarded Yu Qianqiu as a trusted spy sent by the immortal emperor. They always thought that this was just an act, nothing more than a way for the immortal emperor to show himself. Otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence that he picked Yu Qianqiu out of everyone else? Immortal Crocodile Lord and Lu Yanqing's expressions were inexplicable, and Ji Wu could not help but frown slightly. The white-robed scholar leaning against the window of the immortal palace couldn't help but turn around and stare at the extraordinary atmosphere below. Who wouldn't be able to contain their joy? Yu Qianqiu, who was temporarily hiding behind the crowd, was very depressed. Once these words spread, he would become a vile person who rushed to flatter the immortal emperor. He rolled his dead fish eyes and looked at Qingyang next to him, as if saying, Your mother, in order to protect the immortal emperor's authority, she is simply burying me to death. Qingyang glanced at him slightly, as if she had nothing to do with it. Suddenly, the sound of drums resounded from the crowd where the heroes were seated. String music spread out majestically, and the atmosphere of the entire square changed abruptly. In the center of the 100-meter-wide aisle below the steps, the male and female dancers, who were standing with their hands behind their back, began to dance again. As they danced, a large space in the center was gradually emptied. Chapter 1084. These courtesans did not attract anyone's attention. On the other side of the passageway, that faced the immortal emperor and immortal empress, the densely packed golden-robed guards suddenly parted to create a path. Everyone's eyes turned to look at him. A bright red drum embroidered with gold rivets was carried over by a group of bare-chested men. The diameter of the drum was estimated to be 3 to 4 meters wide and 1 meter thick. This was not the most eye-catching thing. The most eye-catching thing was the person standing on top of the drum. A golden-robed man stood on top of it with a majestic aura. Everyone suddenly felt that the golden robe on this person's body gave them a feeling of fear and trepidation. They subconsciously looked at Kim Tai, and then turned their heads to look back. The golden robe of the person standing on the drum was not the golden robe worn by ordinary people from the Immortal Palace. It was exactly the same as the golden robe worn by Jin Tai, the coiling dragon cloud sea that covered the robe, and the golden crown on this person's head. It could be said that other than the person's appearance, everything else was exactly the same as the immortal Emperor Jin Tai's attire. Wow! The crowd was in an uproar. The heads of the various sects, the people on the steps, and the people standing around were all shocked. They could not believe that there was such an arrogant person who dared to be so arrogant in front of the immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Wan Ling and Long Xiaojiu's mouths were wide open. Ji Wu, Yi Xuejuan, and Lu Yanqing were stunned. Bai Qi, who was standing by the window of the Immortal Palace, almost choked to death. He was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped. He muttered to himself, "What is this kid trying to do?" This was the reaction of those who knew Yu Qianqiu. Not bad. The person standing on the drum was none other than Yu Qianqiu, who was pretending to be awesome. After a while, everyone gradually calmed down because they found that the immortal Emperor Jin Tai and the chief steward of the Immortal Palace, Nie Shaoqian, did not seem to be moved by this person's treachery. Everyone came to a realization. It was just a show, but it was scary enough. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu, who was standing on the drum and being carried over, pretended to be awe-inspiring as he scanned his surroundings. He asked himself in his heart, and realized that even the pretentious actions of his 2 lifetimes combined couldn't compare to this one. Although he found the feeling of looking down on all living things, he couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. With this show, his wisdom in this lifetime could be considered to have been shattered to pieces, and he could never pick it up again. The drums suddenly became rhythmic. Under the accompaniment of the string music, a group of bare-chested men carried Yu Qianqiu on the drum like an emperor inspecting the world. When the drum was carried to the center of the passageway, a gentle and melodious string music permeated the cadence of the drum. Nearly 100 dancers wearing golden gauze clothes descended from the sky, surrounding a gorgeously dressed woman in the middle and blocking the front of the drum. They turned a blind eye to the drum and began to dance in front of it. Their dance was exquisite and elegant, like 100 blooming flowers. Everyone held their breath. Yu Qianqiu raised his foot and stepped on the drum. The drum was placed firmly in the center of the passage by those shirtless men. At the front, there were dancers dancing like flowers. The woman in the middle was dancing to the front of the crowd. When she turned her head, she suddenly saw Yu Qianqiu standing on top of the drum. Her dance came to a halt, and her expression became infatuated, as if she had seen a lover she hadn't seen for a long time. Everyone held their breath, and couldn't help but look back at Ji Wu, who was sitting next to the immortal Emperor Jin Tai. This woman's clothes were almost exactly the same as Ji Wu's. The only difference was that her clothes were lighter and more translucent. It was obviously for the convenience of dancing. The majestic Yu Qianqiu on the drum suddenly changed. He looked at the woman in front of him with a gentle gaze. 100 female dancers slowly pushed Ji Wu, who was dressed like Qingyang, towards the drum. At this time, Yu Qianqiu also jumped down from the drum. 100 bare-chested men rushed out from the side of the drum and slowly pushed him towards the other side. Gradually he, who was wearing the dragon robe, stopped when he was only a step away from her, who was wearing the phoenix coronet. Their eyes met, filled with tenderness and reluctance to part. Ho! Ho ho ho! The group of bare-chested men slightly swayed their upper bodies and chanted, as if they were encouraging Yu Qianqiu to do something. Under everyone's encouragement, Yu Qianqiu suddenly pulled Qingyang over and carried her by the waist. Then he turned around and walked towards the drum. The 100 men quickly ran back and used their shoulders to form a human bridge in front of the drum. Yu Qianqiu carried Qingyang and stepped on everyone's shoulders to walk back to the drum. Then he reluctantly put Qingyang down. The 100 bare-chested men and the 100 women quickly gathered around the drum and danced in pairs. In an instant, the crowd was filled with emotions. The music changed again. The majestic tune became softer. Yu Qianqiu's eyes were filled with tenderness. He gently raised his hand and caressed Qingyang's cheek. Together with the music he pitifully sang, captivating the fish and alighting the geese, overshadowing the moon and shaming the flowers, so beautiful that there's nowhere to hide. With her by my side, it's like bathing in the spring sunshine. I'd rather die without regrets. Outstanding beauty and heavenly fragrance, let me entangle you, even if life is short. You and I are willing, you and I are together. How fortunate we are to be a pair. The men who were dancing around the drum immediately followed the last note and sang to their partners, how fortunate we are to be a pair. Qingyang's amorous face immediately bloomed with endless shyness. She stepped back gracefully and danced on the surface of the drum. This dance was peerless. This dance was devastatingly beautiful. This dance blossomed with boundless beauty. This dance made the dancers around the drum pale in comparison. Every piece of her clothes fluttering in the wind was filled with love. Every stretch of her jade-like arms was filled with reluctance to part with Yu Qianqiu. Every time her toes danced on the surface of the drum, it was the sound of her lover's heartbeat. The crowd had never heard such an exciting song. No matter what kind of thoughts they had in their hearts before, everyone's emotions were fluctuating with the rhythm of the song. Qingyang's dancing level could be said to be unparalleled in the world. Every time she moved, it was like a mysterious black hole that swallowed everyone's gaze. According to Qingyang's original plan, Yu Qianqiu was supposed to sing and dance with her at the same time. However, no matter how brilliant the technique she taught him was, Yu Qianqiu, that blockhead, could not understand it even if he was beaten to death. Thus, Qingyang could only come up with this plan. She would dance alone, and Yu Qianqiu would only need to cooperate with her a little. However, what she didn't know was that Yu Qianqiu was not a blockhead. At that point, he really did not have the courage to dance in front of the heroes of the world. Thus, he simply could not learn it even if he was beaten to death. The man dancing under the drum suddenly let out a resounding hi. Yu Qianqiu, who was silently following Qingyang's dancing footsteps, waved his hand and said, "Ah, wait for me to cup my hands and the mountains to please you. Tens of thousands of people will sing in unison for thousands of years to come. Look at the distant mountains smiling and the flowing waters flowing. For generations to come, the seas will dry up and the rocks will rot away." The domineering drum music suddenly turned gentle, and the 100 or so men joined in with a loud hi, before hugging their nimble partners. The dancing of hundreds of flowers suddenly stopped, and only Qingyang was left dancing alone on the drum. She attracted everyone's attention, and in reality, everyone's eyes had never left her. Their eyes were already glued to her nimble dance. Yu Qianqiu, who was on the drum, did not lose out either. He reached out and wrapped his arms around Qingyang's soft waist. He looked at her and sang with deep emotion, "Ah, I'm drunk with you today. I can't let go of your beauty. Don't wait until your hair turns white before you regret it. Ah, I'm drunk with you today. I can't let go of your beauty. Let me hug the beauty back." The majestic drum music continued for a long time. Yu Qianqiu hugged Qingyang and looked at her with a faint smile. Qingyang's eyes were as soft as water, and her jade-like arms were already wrapped around Yu Qianqiu's neck. She buried her head in his shoulder, unwilling to part with him. The music was beautiful, and the dance was even more beautiful. The two's teamwork could be said to bring out the best in each other, and everyone was deeply immersed in it. No one knew who was the first to shout out and clap their hands in praise. Good. In that instant, the thunderous applause pulled everyone back to reality. Jintai, who was sitting high up on the steps, was someone who rarely smiled. However, He couldn't help but reveal a smile on his face this time. He nodded his head slightly to express his praise, and turned his head to look at Ji-woo. Ji-woo's eyes were filled with anger. She wasn't an idiot, and she knew that this song was obviously meant to flatter Jin-tae. It was meant to glorify the love between her and Jin-tae. If it was true, then it wouldn't matter. However, the two of them seemed to be united on the surface, but at heart, they were divided. However, when she suppressed the anger in her heart, she couldn't help but bite her lips. She stared at Yu Qianqiu, who was still pretending to hug Qingyang, with a complicated expression on her face. There was one thing that even she couldn't deny. If this song was not meant to flatter, it was indeed a song that moved her heart. It was a pity that the male protagonist described in the song was not the person she liked. Such talent was used to flatter. Ji-woo was a little angry. If she knew this would happen, she wouldn't have encouraged Jin-tae to let Yu Qianqiu compose the song. At the same time, she had already decided to let Yu Qianqiu flatter her to his heart's content after this. Behind her, Yi Shuijun was also unhappy. He stared at Yu Qianqiu with a livid face. On the other side, Lu Yanqing's face was full of bitterness. Long Xiaojiu and Wan Ling, who were below the stage, were shocked. After coming to their senses, they kept staring at Yu Qianqiu in disbelief. Bai Qi, who was on the window of the Immortal Palace, shook his head repeatedly. Now everyone finally understood that the Immortal Emperor's decree to let Yu Qianqiu compose the song was not a whim. It meant that Yu Qianqiu really did have something up his sleeves. Just as the rhythm of the drum changed again, Yu Qianqiu sent Qingyang away and sang half a line of captivating the birds and alighting the geese. The expressions of all the experts present suddenly changed, and they turned their heads to look into the distance. 6 of the 24 protectors on the stage had already flashed away in an instant. They turned into streams of light and shot in the same direction. Boom! There was an explosion in the distance, and Yu Qianqiu's throat shrank. He could no longer sing. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.